Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We did it. We made it through another week, and now it's time to kick back, have a beverage or two, and watch Happy Hour. Now, I am thoroughly convinced that everyone who attends even just the occasional Happy Hour or the occasional Socialism Saturday know more about what's going on in culture than pretty much everyone else on the internet. I really do believe that. I think that you guys are 1, 2, maybe even as many as 5 years ahead of what's going on in culture, which is a little crazy when you think about it. But the reason that you guys are so far ahead of everyone else is because you actually sit back and you listen to what they're saying. You listen to all of it. You listen to the boring bits, you listen to the cringy bits. You don't just watch the 30-second clips that show up on libs of TikTok or on Fox News or any of that. You are the elite. You will sit here for hours at a time and watch these people shrill you their nonsense. And because you listen to them, you understand what they really mean and what the agenda really is. Exactly, bot. You are in my AP class. This is advanced stuff, master class, if you will, advanced socialism, because that's how we roll on Happy Hour. All right, guys. Now, Happy Hour is a time where we do watch a woke training from start to finish, and we've got a doozy today. I think it's going to be a great bingo day. Let me just pop the bingo card into the chat. I really do think it's gonna be a great bingo day today, and we'll talk about the bingo card in a second. We are watching a presentation from an organization called Race Forward, and it's about the gender binary. Race Forward's innovative race and webinar series brings you Race and the Gender Binary, a webinar introduction to the past and present connections between race, colonialism, and the gender binary. Because if we just abolish the gender binary, then we'll absolutely solve racism, right? Isn't it that how it works? When we have a world full of theys, we will have solved racism. Go us. Eliminating transphobia from our world requires examining not only bigotry, but also the political and material interests of wealthy and powerful people. By the end of this webinar, participants will have a better understanding of how the gender binary functions systematically to maintain white, wealthy, cisgendered men and women at the top of a hierarchy of people. And this organization has been around since 1981, which means it's 41 years old. I know because I was born in 1981, but we don't like to talk. I'm 29. They're 41. I'm 29, obviously. Race Forward serves as the nation's oldest multicultural organization, bringing systemic analysis and an innovative approach to complex race issues to help people take effective action towards racial equity, not equality, equity, while catalyzing community, government, and other institutions to dismantle structural racism. They've been dismantling structural racism since 1981. Look at that. And create equitable outcomes for all. Race Forward publishes the daily news site Color Lines and presents Facing Race, the country's largest multiracial conference on racial justice. Ooh, that might sound like a conference that I might like to go to. I'm going to pull that up and I'm going to look at it later. So today, guys, we are going to be watching a 2-hour presentation from this organization about race and the gender binary. And look at this. We already know we're getting a land acknowledgement right off the bat. How great is that? And that brings me to my bingo card. We're playing normal Unwoke bingo today, which is race focused, but there's also some other stuff in there as well. If you have never played bingo with us, this is just a way to pass the time. You don't win anything, but everyone does get a unique bingo card, and it helps keep us on track. There's the link if you need to download your card. Go ahead, click generate card. Every single card is unique. You get a free space in the middle, and then you get lines. Or we're going for corners. Every time a word is said, you get to check that off the list. Sometimes I make up rules impromptu in the middle of the game. If Chris Rufo is mentioned, you always get a free square because Chris Rufo's the king. And then once we get a regular bingo, we're going for blackout bingo. If you get a bingo, shout it out in the chat. You will get a healthy round of applause, and then we'll move on to the next thing. I did see that AOC embodied her full-on Southern preacher in Congress yesterday. That was fascinating. So, like, it was like they thought there was gonna be no consequence to them kicking Marjorie Taylor Greene off all their committees, even though the Republicans told them there was gonna be a consequence to kicking Marjorie Taylor Greene off the committees. Like, bro, turnabout is fair play. What else can you do? So, guys, we're gonna get into the presentation here in a minute, but before we do that, I just wanna make sure you guys know about a couple of things that are coming up. And of course, we do have, oh, that's not the one I wanted. This one. There we go. Gotta have a little me so you can have the big picture. So I've got a couple articles on my Substack that I just want to draw everyone's attention to. I posted this article just a couple hours ago. I have exclusive audio on my Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn. Let me get my banner here. There it is. I have exclusive audio that you're not going to hear anywhere else of a county GOP leader threatening and trying to browbeat a conservative mom who was running for school board in New Hanover County, North Carolina, which is one of the really important counties where a lot of these battles are being fought right now. And the county GOP tried to pressure her and badger her into becoming a moderate centrist, and they wanted to relax all her messaging. And now guess what? Next week, the conservative, quote unquote, conservative school board that was endorsed by Moms for Liberty, a couple of them, are trying to vote to put radical gender ideology in school. Yeah, you heard that right. These are so-called conservatives who were endorsed by Moms for Liberty in the election, won the election, got onto the school board, and now next week, on Tuesday, there is a vote in which these conservative moms are leaning towards adopting policies that is going to result in radical gender ideology being integrated into the schools. And you can find that on my Substack. You can see all of the information for yourself. You can decide for yourself what I think, but I think that's kind of bullshit. And kudos to the conservative mom who recorded this audio, who had the presence of mind to get it done, to expose these shills for what they are. Not all conservatives are bad, but sometimes you got to keep an eye on them because they're stealthy as fuck. We also had this article last night in which, I don't know if you guys saw this, but yesterday in Congress, 86 Democrats voted to support socialism. That really happened yesterday in Congress. You can read about that on my Substack. And I've also got a workshop that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks all about psychology and disc profiles. This is part of my Unwoke Your Work series. If you want to learn about yourself, if you want to master human psychology, which I'm telling you is useful in so many situations. It is incredibly valuable for fighting back against the woke left in terms of like influencing people, knowing how to navigate the systems of school boards, of politics, of things like that, to get people on our side, to convince people to wake up. That'll help you with that. But it's also useful in so many different ways. It's going to be useful in your professional life. It's going to be useful in your personal life. You can find out more about my Master Your Psychological Style workshop, which will be kicking off on February 16th, and get all signed up for it by heading over to the Substack. Thank you, Brooklyn Way. Brooklyn Way is one of the people that's been on the ground in New Hanover County, and she's doing an amazing, amazing job. And I really do appreciate her efforts. Guys, you can subscribe to my Substack for free. And I would ask all of you to do so. You're going to get pretty much daily updates from me about unwoke news that's going on, analysis. I've got the Woke Mind series where I'm explaining the psychology of the woke left, things like that. You're going to get updates almost every single day. And I also would ask, I'm really trying to get 50 new paid supporters on my Substack. I was going for 100 last month, and we were just a little bit shy. Just a little bit, not a lot. But I'll tell you what, the reason I'm not putting up a paywall on the site is because some of you really stepped up, and there were people at the end of the month that were signing up for memberships on multiple of my platforms because they were like, they really wanted me to be able to keep the Substack open for everyone. And I'd always said if I didn't meet the goal, I was going to put up a paywall. But people really stepped up, man. And so I was like, you know what? I can't deny this, man. You guys showed up for me. I'm going to show up for you. We're going to keep the paywall down for another month. But I do have a goal that I'm trying to hit by the end of the year in terms of overall paid support on the Substack. So I'm just keeping us on track. I think goals are important. So I'm looking to bring in 50 new paid supporters on my Substack. You're looking at $5 a month, $50 a year. I love super chats, guys. I really do. But if you want to take that $5 super chat and put it towards a monthly subscription on my Substack, it's really important because it does help me to be able to plan. I invest a lot of the earnings that I get from doing YouTube, from doing Substack, from doing locals or Patreon, I invest it back into Unwoke activism. And so I'm very transparent. You're going to get a newsletter every Saturday that's going to look like this. That's going to tell you exactly what I worked on for the week. It's also going to have your codes if you want to come into our supporter calls on Monday and Wednesdays. If you want to get into the supporter Discord for movie night, we are doing movie night on Sunday. We're watching Romancing the Stone. And so it'll have all that information for you in my weekly recap newsletter as well. Trendalyn, thank you for the super chat. It is all your fault that I'm now running for at-large for the XCOM for California. Thank you. Thank you, Trendalyn, for your service. Let's all wish Trendalyn the very best of luck. She's running for the leadership board at the Libertarian Party of California. Really exciting. At large is a really important position. And so, Trendalyn, I think it's great that you're seeking out that representation. And I'm sure you're going to do a great job. And, glad to support you and really glad you're taking that step. I think it's going to be amazing. All right, let's see. What else do I have to talk about? Oh, Socialism Saturday. Of course, Socialism Saturday is back, and I actually think that this is going to be one of the most cringy Socialism Saturdays that I've done in a long, long, long time, because I found this kind of tiny, teeny, tiny little socialist podcast. It's so small; it just barely launched. It only has 3 episodes, but 2 of those episodes are about whiteness and capitalism. And so I want to watch it and I want to see what these people have to say, because these are the types of people who are going to say the quiet part out loud. And so we're going to watch and see what they have to say tomorrow at 6 p.m. We can start it a little bit later on Saturdays because my Saturday too, and I have a life and I can't spend all the day with you guys. But we're going to start that at 6 p.m. tomorrow on my main channel. Please subscribe if you would like to be notified. Ring that bell and come and join us for Socialism Saturday. It is one of the most important streams that I do. I really do mean this. This is real socialism. This is not AOC. This is not Bernie Sanders. This is not CNN. This is the real deal. And if you guys listen to what the socialists are saying, you're going to be so far ahead of the curve in terms of understanding where culture is going. It is absolutely unbelievable. And it is the most dystopian shit that you will see all week long. I promise you that. All right. Now, the last order of business is, of course, I need a beer because it's happy hour. And I do have 4 beers here. I do a poll where you guys get to decide what beer I drink first. I'm not going to drink all 4 of these beers, but you want a selection. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you about the beers, and then I'm going to put a poll in the chat. And then you guys are going to get to vote on which beer I'm drinking first. Let's see what we got today. So this first one is a little weird. I'm not exactly sure what to think of it. It's called Sack Lunch Strawberry, and it is a strawberry sour fluffernutter. And this is from Branch Blade, which is a brewery that I tend to really appreciate. But I've never had a strawberry fluffernutter, so I don't know what that is. I'm going to assume it's like strawberry and marshmallow. But how great is that? Since the dawn of man, there have been a debate over which dinner jelly is the best. Grape is the classic, of course, but strawberry is the serious contender and possible number 1. We decided to take matters into our own hands and make the decision for you. We loaded this version of Sack Lunch with marshmallow, peanut butter, and strawberry jelly. How about that? It's basically peanut butter and jelly with marshmallow fluff. That sounds really great. Next one, I had to get this one because fun fact, okay, don't tell anyone. I'm definitely not saying this live on the internet right now. I did mushrooms for the first time a couple weeks ago, and it was an amazing fucking experience, and I recommend it to everyone. I've had so many revelations from that whole literal trip. And so when I saw this beer, I had to. This is called Psychedelic Bliss, and this is a sour ale with mango, tangerine, raspberry, blackberry, and other natural and artificial flavors. And this is also from Branch Blade Brewing. Branch Blade does a great job, man. We can't let our Electric Love series have all of the fun. For the first time, we're bringing you the psychedelic version of Bliss. This branch has mangoes, tangerine, raspberry, and blackberry purees with the addition of our favorite marshmallow topping to add a little sweetness, creaminess, and the perfect flavor combination for this sour ale. That's Psychedelic Bliss. And then we've got, look at this can. Of course, you guys know I have a collection started of like awesome beer cans. And I had to look at this. I was like, what the hell's going on here? This is called Who Loves Orange Soda. And I legitimately do love orange soda. I think orange soda is great. This is brewed by Barrel So's Brewing Company in Saco, Maine. And it is a sour ale with orange, tangerine, and vanilla. Ooh, orange soda. And then the last one, I gotta be honest, I'm a little scared to tell you guys about this one. I got this one purely for the can. Look at that! I don't even know what it is, but that can looks so cool. Now, let me read you what's in this beer. This is a double almond, double chocolate, double coffee, imperial stout with lactose, sugar, chocolate, coffee, and almonds. And this beer, this crazy looking beer, is 12%. 12. That is over double the alcohol content of your average beer. So please don't make me drink this one first. Please. I'm going to drink it. I might drink it tomorrow for Socialism Saturday, but please, I'm showing it to you because I'm trusting you guys, okay? Pick one of the other ones. I'll drink it if you vote for it, but like I think it's a bad idea to start with is all I'm saying. All right, poll is in the chat on YouTube, and I apologize if you're watching on Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, or any other place right now, because I can only do the poll on YouTube, so that's just the way it goes. But again, we've got Strawberry Fluffernutter, we've got Psychedelic Bliss, we've got Orange Soda, and then we've got the beer that shall not be named. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys choose. And while you're voting on that, guys, please mount that like button for me. We do happy hours every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And I hope you enjoy it. It is a great stream. We have a lot of fun with it. Make sure you download that bingo card. I'm just getting set up while you guys are voting. Oh, fuck you guys for voting for that stout. Fuck you. I don't trust any of you anymore. We can't be friends anymore if you guys vote for that stout. Gosh, god damn it, bot. Ah. Come on, Psychedelic Bliss. Psychedelic Bliss. Hang on, I'm ending the poll now. Oh, Psychedelic Bliss is tied with the stout. That means I get to choose. Psychedelic Bliss it is. Ha ha, too bad, so sad. All right. If I get through Psychedelic Bliss, I will drink the stout second. All right. Jeez. I'm not above gaming this shit. I'm not above gaming all of this. All right, guys, let's get started. We are watching Race and the Gender Binary. Let's learn how to solve racism.
For being here. I'm going to first pass things off to my wonderful friend and comrade, Nico. To take us through welcome and some tech housekeeping for us. And then we're going to move into a land acknowledgement.
Jeez.
And then we're going to move into some more of the content of our day. So with that said, off to you, Nico.
Thank you, Malcolm. And I'm just gonna give it a few more seconds for folks to come
it's light.
And you see that the live caption is active. So I'll give more instructions for tech, but if you need live captioning, there's a closed caption button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please, folks, feel free to use that so you can turn that on. We have 200 folks.
Oh, it's so sour.
Over here. Welcome. So exciting. Yeah, let's start.
Let's go ahead.
All right. So thank you, everyone. I am Nico. I am the senior training and client engagement manager at Race Forward, and also head curator for the Race and Webinar series, in which today's webinar is a part of. And let me just tell you a little bit about who Race Forward is and what the Race and series is about. So we are Race Forward.
Yes, I can repost the bingo card.
Multiracial racial justice organization in the country. And you can see some of our projects on the screen right now.
There you go.
Was from Color Lines, basically our daily news website that reports on everything.
I'm so excited that the sound is good today. It's like a banner day when these people get the fucking sound working.
And we have our Facing Race conference happening this year as well as our Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Our membership program for government.
Yeah, see, the problem is that it also turns up my mic at the same time. So it doesn't just turn them up, it also turns up my mic. I do have it.
Work, which is a cross-departmental effort that really tries to imagine a world
we can use it in a
everyone
pinch,
is liberated, where everyone is free, and using an abolitionist frame. And the thing that remains true about Race Forward, even
abolition,
as our project shift or strategy
that's a socialism
shift,
word,
is that we're an organization that really tries to hold ourselves accountable to communities of color. Next slide, Malcolm. And just for context, and Malcolm will say more about how we frame our webinars and analysis that we use, but today's webinar is part of our Race and Webinar series. Our Race and Webinar series puts race at the forefront of our conversations to say that if we are not putting race at the forefront, then we are not going to address racism in our strategies. Our Race and Webinar series also talks about race explicitly, but not exclusively, and really using an intersectional lens, which Malcolm will also talk more about later. And here is our text, just some short tech guide for folks. So folks, the chat is open right now, but once we finish our land acknowledgements, we'll close the chat, and folks can feel free to chat the panelists in case you have any sort of issue. We also have the Q&A button there where we will collect your questions. We will have 2 opportunities for the Q&A. And finally, we have a closed caption button, which you can use to activate the closed captioning. And lastly, I want to introduce the folks that are with us today. We have amazing, you see on the screen, Shannon, who is one of our ASL interpreters. Along with Shannon is also Carolyn Boykins. Carolyn, do you mind just saying hi to the camera if you're able to? Just so we can see your face. Hello, thank you so much for joining us. And lastly, we have Heather Easterly, who is doing live caption. Heather, I wonder if you're able to also say hi to the camera for us as you're typing our caption. If not, okay, we'll see you later. And me, of course, and of course, Emmy. Emmy, if you just want to say hi to folks by showing your face on camera. Hello, Emmy, thank you. And yeah, we have a great
they all look like
people,
socialists.
Really, I want to pass on the mic to the star of the show, my amazing friend and colleague who has led this particular webinar all throughout, from all the research, the content, and the facilitation. And Malcolm will say more about themselves later on, but just
themselves. They're they.
Malcolm Shanks. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for doing this for Race Forward.
Thank you so much, Nico. Thank you, Shannon, Carolyn, Heather, and Emmy for being such an amazing Access team in advance. I already know we're about to do a great job together. I feel like I have to do that self-deprecating thing where I say, I am definitely not the star of this show. Hopefully, the star of this show will be these like amazing visuals that I spent a lot of time on. So with that said, we're going to go through and do some of them. We're going to look through. First, we're going to start off with a land acknowledgement, because it's always important that if we are talking about anything having to do with race, especially
I love
in the
pistachios.
United States,
they're so annoying to eat though with the shells, but I love them.
That we talk about how the basis of this racial hierarchy and the racial structure in the United States is the theft of indigenous land, past and ongoing policies of displacement and genocidal warfare against indigenous peoples, and also a public culture that erases Native American people and glorifies the violence that was required to conquer a continent. And so I've put a map here in front of us. This is a map of the stolen lands, just for a comparison here. In the red, in the sort of deeper, darker red here, we have the current reservations or the current land in which indigenous people are sovereign over their own affairs. And then we have the rest of it, which used to be indigenous land and is still indigenous land, actually, which used to be sovereign indigenous land, I should say, and is now under the colonial occupation of the United States government. And so there are a couple of things, of course, that are missing or even historically inaccurate about this map. And so I want to name those because I don't want us to think that this is the way that indigenous land looks, right? One is that the borders of the United States were never predetermined. They were never a foregone conclusion.
He is struggle sessioning himself.
The borders, for example, in the South with Mexico is only about 150 years old, and the border in the North was also negotiated about 150 to 200 years ago. Those were done without indigenous people, and in many places were done in order to control or split apart indigenous people from one another. And so there are lots of indigenous communities that don't recognize the colonial borders of the United States, Canada, or Mexico in North America. They've had to deal with many European empires, the succession
what does this have to do
European
with gender?
Empires, and then those specific colonial governments.
Europeans.
And so in many ways, it's necessary to say that these borders have been just as much shaped by indigenous resistance as much as they have been by European
Exactly,
policy.
William. We didn't get a vote either.
And so I'm getting a note that it's really quiet. I just want to check in. Is anybody else
No, your sound is great.
getting quiet for me, or can you all still hear me pretty clearly? Good here. Okay, I'm seeing. Okay, excellent. Thanks, everybody. Awesome. So I'm gonna continue. The other thing I want to note is that there are like some dark splotches here that are about the places that were already occupied formally by European settlers during that time. So there's a splotch around Los Angeles or Southern California and Nevada. There's a splotch around Texas and Louisiana, which used to be France, and a bit on the East Coast, and what's clear, or what should be clear, is that all of this is stolen indigenous land. From in the East, we are talking about the Muskogee and the Creek, all the way at the.
This is an impressively long land
United
blessing.
States
this is
now,
going on
the
for like half an hour. This is why this presentation is 2 hours long.
To it, all the way to the Lenape and the Haudenosaunee, who I'll be talking about a little bit. All the way up to what is now the colonial border of the United States, where the Abenaki, the people of the Don, are located. And the other thing that we should also mention that someone is saying, thank you, Melissa, is that we cannot forget that the United States has acquired lots of colonial territories that are also indigenous lands that are not in the continental United States.
Like what?
For example, Alaska, Hawaii, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Samoa, Chamorro, Midway Island, right? All of these are indigenous land, and all of these are stolen and conquered indigenous lands as well, right? The list can go on and on. Yeah, absolutely. But I want to be a little bit more specific about the land that I'm currently occupying.
My God! This land blessing is going on forever.
And so the land that I'm currently in is Lenape territories. I'm in Brooklyn, New York. And so technically that would be Canarsie or Rockaway tribe within the Lenape nation. Lenape means original people in the dialects of Lenape.
I can't wait till we watch Gangs in New York for movie night. That's going to be an epic movie night.
The Lenape language is a few different dialects. And so Lenape means original people in all of them. Lenape have a matrilineal kinship culture, which means that if anyone wants to know who you are, who you belong to, they're going to ask who your mother is. That's what's going to be important. It's also true that the Lenape created and maintained extraordinary trade routes. If I were to go into the south of Manhattan right now, Broadway, which is one of the most famous streets, I would say, possibly in the United States, besides Main Street, I guess, it stretches all the way from the southern tip of Manhattan, all the way to the northern tip of Manhattan now, but used to extend far beyond that into what's now Connecticut, and also what originally
this is
went
seriously,
all the way
this is like beyond
Wampanoag, Mashpee territories, or
we need to send this guy
territories in Boston.
I think that we should send this guy a plaque for the longest land blessing in the history of land blessings. I cannot recall ever hearing a land blessing that just kept going. And this is Bot said it earlier. This is a land lecture. This is not a land blessing. It's a land lecture. That has nothing to do with the topic.
And what is now colonially known as Boston. There were fisheries that were also maintained in order to keep fish that growing that were coming through the Hudson Valley or the Hudson River Valley, as well as the Delaware Bay, and agricultural forests, such that when settlers first got to this area of the world, they actually could just drive their horses and wagons in between trees and thought they were just in some sort of wildly beautiful, uncurated natural space. And what is real, what is reality, is that they were simply unable to see the work that had gone into creating agricultural forests. Lenape and many other people of the Eastern Woodlands simply would go to where the food grew well and would continue to
I feel like New Hampshireites are creatures of the Eastern Woodlands.
The entry of Europeans into Lenape-Hoking or Lenape territory or the land of the original people in the dialects of Lenape
this has got to be a parody.
The early 1500s.
Oh shit! I fucked it up. Oh no, we're gonna have to start the land blessing again. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Hang on! Oh no! Oh god! This is like a 3-slide fucking land blessing. What the? This has got to be a parody. This can't be real life. They're fucking with us. Come on.
1500s actually. Some of the first people in this area were European settlers or were Italian. However, the first colonizers in this area to actually settle the southern tip of Manhattan were Dutch, and they attempted to parlay with the Lenape people or to get land from them. One of the ways that they did that was by treachery, if I'm to be honest.
Treachery.
Basically, the Lenape people have a different concept of land use to give gifts.
Exactly. Everyone watched Last of the Mohegans or Dances with Wolves,
not necessarily
which I think is better than Last of the Mohegans.
To buy that land or to then own that land. And so that created
what a day to not have land blessing on your bingo card.
I would say treachery on the part of the...
Everyone who doesn't have land blessing on their bingo card gets a free square. I'm making up a new rule. Everyone needs to benefit from this monstrosity of a land blessing.
Dutch who got that land. And so we can see a map here. Wall Street is another famous street in the United States that comes from this area. Actually, the major in the top left corner of your screen, you'll be able to see a large sort of street, and that is Broadway, the original.
If this motherfucker has another slide in this land blessing,
you can see that is crossing.
I'm opening up that 12% beer.
Wall Street and was Wall Street then. What is true is that it was always an exclusion zone. Wall Street was named that because it was created to keep Lenape people out of the Dutch colony, and it became known as a well-known marketplace because the walls were where European settlers would come to trade with the Lenape people whose home they were occupying. It is also true that one of the first slave markets in the continental United States was built on Wall Street. That
You
wall,
did, Brian.
as a matter
It's
of
true.
fact, was built by enslaved
You guys were trying to help
Africans
me.
of the Dutch. And so Wall Street in and of itself is a
This
kind of
psychedelic beer is pretty
international
good, though,
story
man.
here. We have basically an area where European settlers come into indigenous land. They then stole that land from them, used enslaved Africans or the labor of enslaved Africans to build some of the infrastructure.
Okay, people are asking to explain the land blessing. The land blessing is what they do to present their virtue, and so they feel less guilty about being on it. Basically, it's like when they say, we don't really own this land. This land is the land of these 14 indigenous tribes that the colonizers stole from them when they colonized America. That's all it is. It's like it's a virtue signal. It's nothing more, so that they can show how righteous and pure they are. No, Murphy's Pool, I know what your drink recommendation is going to be, and I don't want to drink Italian water beer.
Structure of that land, and then continued to, and then actually sold that land later to the British for a very small island in Indonesia that had lots of nutmeg and mace that they wanted to complete their sort of colonization of Southeast Asia at that point. So we actually have a really
of the land blessing. It's self-flagellation, verbal self-flagellation.
The Lenape people were successful in fighting off the Dutch, and it's one of the reasons that the Dutch decided to sell the colony to the British. The majority of Lenape land, however, was taken in what was called the Walking Purchase of 1737. It was in many ways tricked out of Lenape hands and forced out of Lenape hands by the children of William Penn, who's the namesake of Pennsylvania, the state. Lenape land is mostly in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, southern Connecticut, and southern New York. And so one of the things they did, and this is a really fascinating story, is that they took a fake deed that William Penn had not gotten signed and not had agreed to by the Lenape people of the Delaware Valley. And they took it and they said, hey, you all agreed to this, and so you must give us land that equals a 1.5 days walk from the Delaware Creek from the Delaware River to someplace different. And so what they did at that point, when the Delawares, which is the European name for the Lenape Delawares, when the Delawares actually agreed to it, what the Europeans then did, or William Penn's children did, was send 3 of their fastest runners to run diagonally across that territory, to the point where they got at least 3 times as much land as they thought they would.
Oh my
Originally,
God.
The Lenape people of that area thought that they were going to give around 400 or 4,000 acres, or 400 acres, and they ended up giving about 1,200.
Happy Friday to you, Hal.
Land. And so that is what eventually became the colony of Pennsylvania. Another thing to note here is that the Delaware were actually removed several times. There are nations like the Cherokee and the Seminole that were only moved once from their ancestral homelands in the southeast to Oklahoma, or Indian country, where they reside. The Delaware and the Lenape were removed several times, and you can see in the upper right corner a map of the different phases of removal. Basically, the United States.
This is mind-boggling how long this is. I apologize to everyone. I didn't know we were going to get a half-hour-long fucking land blessing.
Would come and say, we actually want this land. You all need to move again.
Exactly, Kelly. Summed up beautifully.
In spite of that legacy,
the
Lenape were able to maintain their cultural ways, were able to maintain many of their dialects, and were able to maintain as well their sovereignty as a nation, which very few nations were able to do, especially nations on the East Coast. And so recently, the rematriation of Lenapehoking, or the rematriation of Lenape ancestral lands, has picked up pace because of this return to the sort of original relations. Some good news is that in 2018, that's actually a typo here.
He's going to stop as soon as you start that vacuum, Mama.
After more than 300 years, the Lenape people were able to hold
We're going to send this guy a fucking certificate or something.
Land in southern
Longest
Manhattan.
land blessing in the history of fucking land blessings.
What's also true, here's a picture of it actually, is that green corn, which is, or black corn, I'm sorry, seisaping in the Lenape dialect, is now sprouting.
We're getting a lesson about
and
fucking
growing
corn now
on the island of Manahata for the first time in more than 200 years as well. And so these are all evidences and examples of rematriation, as we call it. There are two reasons to use matriation here. One of them, excuse me.
Fuck this guy.
One of them is that the Lenape people are matrilineal.
No, seriously.
And so there's nothing there's no sort of fatherland to return things to, right? The Lenape people in many ways think of the earth as a mother. And as the person who determines their role in tribe and clan, et cetera. And so to return to the right relations, to return to a relationship with sovereignty, political sovereignty, to right the colonial relationship.
You know what this is like? This is like when I'm driving somewhere and I have Waze up, and Waze is telling me to go in a direction that I think is going to take longer than I actually want to go. And I'm like, fuck you, Waze. I know I can go this way and it's going to be much quicker. But Waze is like, no, you want to go around this way. And I'm like, no, I know better than you, computer. And then I go the way that I want to go and I ignore Waze, and Waze starts beeping at me. It's like, turn the fuck around, make a U-turn. You're going to want to listen to us. And I'm like, no, I'm doing what I want. And then I run into a traffic jam because Waze always knows more than you do. It always has access to more information. It knows that there's an accident or something going on, and it's going to take you an extra half hour if you go the way that's normally the quickest, and that's why it's trying to route you around the accident. This is the lesson that I'm learning, is that I should have listened to you guys when you told me to drink the 12% beer, because I would have, like, this half-hour land blessing would have been so much more bearable if I just had the fucking beer. So I apologize. I will never doubt you again. It was my fault. I thought I knew better.
Is an end the colonial relationship with the United States government and to return the land to its caregivers, its rightful caregivers, is the definition that many Indigenous people are thinking of for rematriation. And we see here a quotation from another Indigenous person on the African continent, Bernadette Mutine, who's the director of Engender South Africa, where she defines rematriation. And so I've always really loved this quotation from Joy Harjo's An American Sunrise. It says, "We are still America. We know the rumors of our demise. We spit them out. They die soon." Joy Harjo is Muskogee Creek. The Muskogee Creek are a people whose ancestral homelands are in the Alabama, Georgia, and Florida areas. And she is the first poet laureate. She's the first Native American woman poet laureate of the United States. I love this quotation because it reminds me of George Jackson, who was the field marshal for the Black Panther Party. He said something very similar in his book, Blood in My Eye. So what I would love now is
don't you dare have another slide.
To go to the link that Emmy has dropped.
Oh,
in the
thank
chat
God! It
here.
seems like it's over.
If you go to that link, nativeland.ca.
Oh God!
You can, with a certain amount of accuracy, type in where you are.
Oh my God! He is now instructing people in the chat to go to a website to do their own land blessing. He is currently instructing people to do another fucking land blessing. Can you believe this guy? Savrits, those who dispersed around the globe centuries ago, can now absorb the technology and culture of those nations. The more nation guilt felt, the easier the absorption will be, not through achievement. That's exactly right, Savrits. Those who dispersed around the globe can now go and absorb the technology and culture of those nations. I agree. So I want to just relieve everyone of the obligation to do their own self-flagellation land blessing. You don't have to do it. It's fine.
The name of your town, the name of your area, of your city, and you can see the land or the territory or the territory of which Indigenous people you are in. And so what I would love is if folks can just type that in and then shout out the Indigenous nations whose territory you are currently occupying. One of the reasons to do this, beyond the fact that there are so many of us, right, is that if any of us are in the Western Hemisphere or Australia, or Aotearoa, New Zealand, for example, then many of us are occupying indigenous land with a colonial relationship. And so it's important to recognize that as the basis of our racial hierarchy and the basis of our racial construct as we know it. It was created to
because race is a construct, remember,
or to give reason to this theft and the policies of murder that allowed that theft to continue and sustain itself.
We're 23 minutes into this and it hasn't started yet.
To the time in the future when that colonial relationship ends. And so it's also then necessary for us to talk about Indigenous people using the past, present, and future tense.
Bro, you know that if the colonialist relationship ends, you're going to have nowhere to live, right? You know that means you're going to have nowhere to live and you're going to have to leave.
Because it is, because Lenape people have been able
keep us. We did
maintain their sovereignty and their ways of life throughout these policies of displacement, and will continue and grow and reawaken some of their ancestral habits and rituals as well once the colonial relationship with the government is dissolved and once the United States no longer has control over these areas. So we're not going to move forward and act as if like, oh, here's the land acknowledgement and then here's the real stuff. We're going to continue to
I just want to acknowledge that, listen, I'm actually in favor of secession. People know this. I want New Hampshire to secede from the United States. However, I'm not stupid enough to think that the United States is going to dissolve. I just want to like peacefully leave and then form trade relationships where we can all still kind of get along and peacefully coexist. And you guys can just like leave us alone and I don't have to pay income tax and stuff like that. But like this guy literally just called for the dissolution of the United States. And I suppose some people would say that secession is the same thing. All right, maybe. But I just think it's a little unrealistic to think that the United States is just going to dissolve on its own with just by doing land blessing.
To think about this as the basis of the knowledge that we are creating or that we are creating today. And so I want us to move forward and listen to to a Native woman in person or directly. She's not Lenape, she's Anishinaabe.
Oh my God, it's still fucking going?
Maybe doesn't need introduction, but I'll introduce her anyway.
Why?
And so in order to frame the what, why, and how of what we're going to be doing today. And so Winona LeDuc is White Earth Anishinaabe. She used to be a chief, I believe, within that tribe and on that territory.
No, I don't want to watch this film. I'm going to get copyright strike.
An activist, a writer.
No copyright strikes, Phil.
Vice president. And a fun fact about that actually is that she's the only candidate of the Green Party ever to win an electoral vote in the United States. And that was in 2016. So I'm going to just play a clip of her and then I'm going to continue after that.
29 fucking minutes on a land blessing. Did you fast forward, Brian? God. No, we're still on the land blessing, I think.
Anyone hearing this?
No. We don't need to. It's okay.
Wonderful.
Oh God.
How about now?
Ani nindoe maganaduk, ngagoi gitamagas. Bine sequé to go makwa and dodam, go babani cog, ish kaniganing and nunjba, which. Greeting you in Ojibwe, as you probably gathered, a language from this Omaha king here. And I'm thanking you very much for the honor of being here. I'm telling you, I'm from White Earth up north.
And like, I actually have great respect for Indigenous people. Like I've done a lot of shamanic stuff, man. I appreciate their history. I appreciate the heritage. There's a lot of things that I appreciate about how they approach things in the communities. Like I did an event one time with one of the freaking grandmothers, like the 7 grandmothers or whatever. That's like a big deal. And so it's not to say I don't appreciate this, and I'm not trying to make fun of it because I do actually have a lot of reverence for their culture, but a 29-minute land blessing is just unrealistic. It is unsustainable. Come on. And it makes me not want to like it, is the thing. It drives me away from it. There's so many beautiful things about like Native American heritage and culture. There really are. But it's like, I have to sit through a 29-minute fucking lecture about this stuff. I just don't care anymore. Savrits, I'm an actual Native American, Delaware tribe descendant. No blacks were here. Imagine letting a group believe they're a highest beings, peace and chaos. Yeah, I mean, Savrits, exactly. Savrits, do you feel like you've been accommodated by the 29-minute land blessing? Savrits actually understands this stuff.
Observation. I'm calling you my relatives. I wanted to start like that because I thought about what I'm going to talk to you about tonight, which is that food for us comes from our relatives, whether they have wings or fins or roots. And indeed, that is how we consider food. Food has a culture, it has history, it has stories, it has relationships that tie us to our food. Food is more than something you just buy at the store. Something that just doesn't have a stamp on it. In our community, we are told a long time ago by our prophets. Our Anishinaabe people lived on the eastern seaboard. And we're related to those people out there, the Wampanoags and others. And we were instructed by our prophets that we should follow a shell which appeared in the sky. And in following that shell, we would arrive at the place where the food grows upon the water. And that food that grows upon the water is monomen, or wild rice. So we were instructed by the Creator to move here. Omaha came to this place. And our wild rice, our monomen, is our most sacred food. It is a food that is first food given to a child when they can eat solid. It is last food before you pass into the spirit world. It's for all our feasts and all our ceremonies. It's very important to us. And we, as you know, we fought hard and long to keep our rice and to keep it good. This is a picture of Nokomis and Nana Boujou. That's
Hang on, I see a question in the chat, and honestly, I don't know the answer to this question. I really don't. Are most Indigenous Americans in the U.S. woke or anti-woke? My suspicion is that a lot of them have been like roped into this bullshit, kind of against their will. Savage, you might have some insight on this. Like, I don't know if most of them are woke or anti-woke. I think that most of them are just like trying to live their lives and want to be left alone, I would think. And the thing of it is like, you know, there are elements of their culture that might seem woke, but they're not woke. Why it might seem woke is that, and I'm really just going off the cuff here of like based on my lived experience, it might seem woke because their culture has been appropriated by these fucking people. And so that's why it seems woke, but I wouldn't say it is, you know?
Our spirit beings from who we descend, making wild rice. And this is my community today. Do pretty much the same thing as we did for 1,000 years. We got an aluminum canoe now instead of a birch bark. Hard to get trees that size these days. But we still rice. And then the month that is called Menominee Gizes, Wild Rice Making Moon, August into September, you'll see our people go out on the lakes. And we feel a great joy when we go out there with our 2 sticks in a canoe, go out there and harvest the rice. Sometimes it's tall or short or fat or skinny or looks like a bottle brush or looks all punked out. It's diverse. And that's how we can keep it, because when a wind comes through, it blows off some of the rice, it doesn't blow off other rice. There's great diversity, you know, in that. We still parch it the same way over a fire. You can dance on your rice and your new moccasins and do pretty much the same thing for all these years. And that defines us as Anishinaabe people. Our story of our relationship to food is similar to...
I think it's very disrespectful for him to stop in the middle of the TED Talk.
So the reason I showed this is because I think it's very, very important for us to also take Indigenous ways of understanding and ways of being as the origin and the foundation for the knowledge that we're going to be building about race and the gender binary. It is no accident that the diversity that
They're going to use this to talk about two-spirit people, which is exclusive to indigenous people. You can only be two-spirit if you're indigenous.
What Nona LaDuke is referring to is also thought of as
now I understand.
An asset for resilience for her and her people, right? And so that is one of the main theses, right, or hypotheses or ideas that I'm going to be having today. It is really not super difficult. It is that biodiversity and gender diversity.
Savrit says she is guilt tripping and is for the revolution. I mean, that's probably true. Most of these people are. Sam, you did call it. I feel a little cheated as well. She was like the only person in this scenario that I actually kind of liked.
Are one and the same thing. That gender diversity is merely one expression of human diversity, and that this sort of gender diversity actually creates a human species that is more resilient over time. That actually, what if we, instead of thinking like many conservatives do as trans and gender nonconforming people as like a harbinger or a bringer of societal collapse, as an infection or a stain on our society, what if instead we truly admitted actually that healthy ecosystems produce trans and gender nonconforming people, and that trans and gender nonconforming people contribute to healthy, sustainable ecosystems of the human species. And so that is an idea that we're going to come back to again and again throughout the day. I swear I'm going to keep coming back to it because I'm going to keep hammering it home. If it sounds really abstract now, hopefully it will sound less abstract by the end of our time together. Here are the goals of our webinar. So one is to discuss how racial hierarchies have evolved over time through gender violence. What is true is that racism and white supremacy, in order to be instituted, required just a ton of violence against people, and a lot of that was gender violence. Second, we're going to hear stories of African indigenous people who resisted colonialism and the gender binary about 400 years, starting about 400 years before Stonewall. That just so happens to be the time that Europeans started to sort of impose their gender categories and their gender cultures on the rest of the world. And we'll talk a little bit about why that happened. And then we don't want to stay in some of the we don't want to pretend, just as we do with African indigenous people, that trans and gender nonconforming people only resist in the past and only exist in the past and the present. So we want to also envision ways of being and doing beyond what I'm calling, and what lots of people are calling, the colonial gender binary.
The colonial gender binary.
I want to introduce myself. So,
he's a they, he. Okay.
I use they and he pronouns interchangeably.
Why might someone use they and he pronouns? This is a pop quiz for everyone that's been watching Socialism Saturday. You've definitely learned this if you've been watching Socialism Saturday. Why might someone use they and he pronouns, or they and she, depending? Well, how can someone be both a part of the gender binary and not a part of the gender binary at the same time? I quite frankly disagree with this being linked to Gnosticism as much as James Lindsay's trying to make it linked to Gnosticism, Alexia. That's just not, like, I think that I'm not saying that it's not true to some extent, but not to the extent that he's saying it is. Yes, exactly. They're doing it to be part of it. They're doing it to abolish gender. Exactly. They're doing it because they don't consider themselves to be non-binary, but non-binary is the ultimate goal of all of this. What they're trying to do when they're abolishing the gender binary is to quite literally get rid of men and women. And so being a they, being a non-binary, is considered to be like the highest form of evolution. And so this is their way of being like, I'm queer too. I'm non-binary too. I'm part of the cool kids club. I am a socialist. That's all it is. It's to fit in with the group. They don't believe that trans means transition. They believe that trans means transform, as in transform gender, as in abolish gender, as in liberate themselves from gender. So trans people will still exist, but they'll just be a they. Kate, I don't know why your card is marking itself. Probably, you know what I did? Fuck, you know what I did? I fucked up. Hang on. I fucked it up. This is my fault. I generated the card and then I put the link in the chat. Shit. Yep, the card is marking itself. 1 second. Hang on. Listen, okay, so if you have a card that's marking itself, there's your fresh bingo card. I didn't generate it this time. And so the only thing you've really we just got through the land blessing. Okay? So you're cool. All right, guys, please mount that like button for me.
For those who don't know, that would sound like if you were talking about me, but not using my name in a sentence, you might say something like Malcolm went to the store and then he bought ice cream and then they ate the ice cream before they got to the counter. So he had to hand the cashier an empty wrapper to ring up. That would be how you would talk about me. Some people just use their names, but I use they and me interchangeably. So I am deeply, deeply excited to be here and so nervous to be talking to you all about this subject that's been so important to me and that I've been working on for so long, actually. So I think in 2014, I've been a facilitator doing social justice work and an organizer for about 15 years now, and I've been doing that facilitation for just as long, right? And so in 2015, after years and years of doing, trans ally trainings and racism 101 trainings and imperialism trainings, et cetera, right? I finally started to put all of that stuff together in my head because we were doing a trans ally training for a group of South Asian youth. And so me and my co-facilitator were like, why don't we just actually tailor it to brown and black people? How about we do that? We don't pretend that to be trans is to have a white or a middle class experience, but instead come from the understanding that there are many different genders, many different cultures, and many different ways that those cultures understand gender. And so...
so you can't be white and middle class if you're trans? All right.
We started with the question, how did the whole world even get to genders, right? How did this idea even come to our understanding? And so since then, it's led me in a whole bunch of different ways. I should go back a little bit further. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. That is where I am
Of course you were, probably.
I still have a 202 number and a D.C. ID. It's so important to me. The thing that, and that's also Nkochtank, Piscataway land and territory, if we're talking about...
Oh my God, we just did a retroactive land blessing. Holy shit.
One thing that I saw all around me was patterns in who was allowed there, who was allowed where, patterns in why my neighborhoods never seemed to have, the neighborhoods that I lived in never seemed to have enough, why the neighborhoods that I would go to for extracurricular activities or to go to the museum or to learn things always seem to have too much. Why, when it's supposedly the nation's capital in one of the richest countries on earth, that no matter whether a Republican or a Democrat is president, the hood kind of always looks the same, right? And so these are questions that I had a lot growing up. I was really lucky to grow up in a community of people, shout out to my mama, who told me the truth when I was asking questions and who also went out of their way to educate me about the patterns that they also saw in the world. And a lot of times those patterns included white supremacy and racism. What I didn't get pointed out a lot, though, was the many trans and gender nonconforming and queer Black people who were around me all the time, who all those deeply politicized Black people kept telling me we're not a part of our community, we're not a part of our history, and we're not a part of our identity. And so that in many ways was some
Oh no, she's claiming to be Two-Spirit. Oh no, Fran.
I'm certainly not the only one to ask these questions, but I'm hoping that some of the answers that I've come up with will be helpful to you all. So I'm really excited to dive right in. So here are some of the words that we'll be using today. Please don't log out immediately. I swear I'm not going to be using all of them in a row. So I wanted to get them all on a screen for you all, just in case there's any confusion about some of the words. Like there's a lot of isms and 3 and 4 syllable words that have been used to have this conversation, when in reality, as we said right earlier, it's not that complicated. The idea that the diversity of our species is an asset, And so there are a couple that I want to pull out and name for us, and there's one that I missed that I also want to name here. So a couple of them that I'll be using. We're going to define imperialism later, so I'm going to leave that. Capitalism. Capitalism is a sort of global system right now where people use money to produce more money instead of, for example, using their labor to produce goods that other people can use. It's a system that's based on using the labor of people who do work to produce money that then will produce more money over time. So it makes rich people who have money richer because they already have money, and people who work and do not have money less wealthy over time.
Bot, then scroll up and get a bingo card. Jesus Christ.
Neo-colonialism is one that I do also want to talk about, or colonialism generally. Colonialism is what we saw during the land acknowledgement, when the Dutch took that tiny little portion of land, and then suddenly it became more and more and more, right? Colonialism is when people travel to a place that they are not from and settle there. Sometimes, and in the context of colonialism, it's usually about the power relationship. Many people migrate and travel, but not all people impose their ways of being, their laws, and their realities on the lands that they come to. And so when that happens, we call it colonialism. When the people who have that system imposed on them are able to somehow free themselves or free their land, and but the world system that created colonialism and that maintains it is still in place, i.e. capitalism, then we call that neocolonialism. A great example of that is when, for example...
So what you're telling us is that you want to abolish capitalism. That's what he's saying. Remember, guys, if you're new here, the 4 goals of the woke left always and forever are the following: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Their number one enemy is not white people. It is not straight people. It is not cisgendered people. It is capitalism. They want to abolish capitalism.
Cuba fights to free itself from the colonialism of Spain or the Spanish, and then comes very quickly into the sphere of influence and starts selling the same things that they used to sell for a low price. They start selling those things to the United States. The same people who were enslaved and working to grow sugar and make rum for the Spanish were being paid almost nothing or still enslaved to send things to the United States instead. Instead, the only difference was that now Cuba was no longer technically a property of Spain, right? And so in name only, countries are able to achieve their freedom and yet are still indebted or are still in some ways enslaved to a world system that sees them and their people as inferior. And patriarchy is one that I also wanted to name here. It is a system, it comes from the Greek of rule by the father. And so I want to name that patriarchy is a world system in which all men are empowered to make rules and make culture and to determine what all women and people who are not men do. But people I also who are want to not name men. That patriarchy is a class institution as well. And what I mean by that is that patriarchy concentrates power in the hands of very few men, who then create a culture where all men think they share in that power because they can oppress people who are not men. Another thing I wanted to say is BIPOC. That stands for Black and Indigenous people and people of color. Lots of people have named the necessity for us to actually pull out the relationships that Black people have in the 2 United States and Canada and Cuba and Venezuela and all sorts of nations where they were enslaved in the Western Hemisphere and beyond. And then obviously also then Indigenous people also have a very specific political relationship to the United States, to Canada, and to other nations that politically have gotten rid of their ability to run their own affairs. And then people of color is an umbrella term that we are often using for politics. And so the last one that I want to name here is ableism.
Cops coming after that crime of a land blessing. Indeed, Kelly.
That's going to come up again.
Indeed.
And so that's why I wanted to name it. Ableism is the idea, is a culture of oppression and exploitation, whereby people who are not able to function according to how society decides they should are thought of as lesser than, that bodies that are not shaped like the norm of what those people decide should be the norm of humans are thought of as less than. Those people are thought of and are treated as if they are incapable of doing things or incapable of participating in society. And then there's a lot of violence that comes from devaluing people because of what they can and cannot do for work, right? And so ableism will come up because the way that people are shaped and the way that they move their bodies in many ways is determined to be bad for society. And so in that in many ways also applies to transphobia and antagonism against trans people, because they and we are also told that we are not using our bodies correctly, that we are not moving them correctly, and that they are not shaped correctly. And so there's a lot of overlaps between what we will be talking about as transphobia today and ableism. Thank you. Someone also mentioned there's also the major overlap, because continuing today, but for a long history, gender nonconformity or being gender nonconforming or choosing not to participate in the gender norms of society was also then thought of as evidence of mental illness and mental unfitness. And so there's also a devaluing of people in our society generally because they are thought to not have the brain capacity or brain functioning of the people who are making those rules and who have that power. And so they also devalue those people because of the ways that their brains work. So why race and? These are a couple of reasons, right?
Kimberly Crenshaw.
So I also want to name
intersectionality.
It centralizes race explicitly without focusing on race exclusively. You know, we have different social locations, and we also have different intersecting issues in our lives. We don't live single issue lives, as Audre Lorde says. And so it also allows for clear and nuanced analysis of domination and exploitation. It can break down false conflicts so that we can build stronger coalitions. And it also allows us to consider the full complex personhood of Black and Indigenous people of color. But I also want to name that Race Forward did not invent race and as a concept, and that race and is not a new concept either. A lot of people have heard of the term of intersectionality. A lot of people have heard the term intersectionality. It was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who was the co-founder of the African American Policy Forum. It was coined by her in 1989. However, the idea of intersectionality has a very, very long history. And so I want to do just a little bit of acknowledgement of the intellectual labor that has come into creating the idea of intersectionality. So one of the first times that just stretching back, I'm sure that one could go to folks like Phyllis Wheatley, for example, for even further back in the 1700s and early 1800s to talk about the concept of the idea that one isn't just Black, one isn't just a woman, one isn't just one thing at a time. But one
Yasmin, you are a troublemaker, but I appreciate it.
At the same
I
time.
do.
Sojourner Truth, at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851, had to intervene in a moment that she thought of as not only racist, but also patriarchal, but also sexist, right? And so in that moment, what she said, it was immortalized in many ways, the famous "Ain't I a Woman" speech. But we should also name that she actually didn't say "Ain't I a Woman." That was some random white dude who was like, she must talk like this because she's Black. I would really encourage people to check out the Sojourner Truth Project .org to see the true history.
Hang on, I want to acknowledge something Alexia is saying in the chat, because this is actually kind of the point of doing happy hour. The worst thing about every single one of these types of lectures is that I never learn one single new thing. I can predict everything they'll say before they say it. And that is because this is a cult. It's a good thing, Alexa, that you can predict what they're going to say before they say it, because that means you understand what's going on and you can use that knowledge to teach people. So I say own it. You know, I know that this stuff is boring sometimes. We like I said, we want to use this for all that it's worth, because if you can show people these people are literally saying the same thing every single time like they're robots, that's something we can use to wake people up. Brandon's got a bingo. Congratulations, Brandon.
And the true transcript of that actual speech, a Sojourner Truth said it. A woman who worked to educate herself in spite of it being illegal would not have, or did not in that moment, I wouldn't say would not, did not in that moment choose to speak up and not use perfect English in order to communicate with the white abolitionists around her. And so when she said, "Am I not a woman?" what she was naming was that there were contradictions in whiteness in the ways that they treated women and in the ways that they were talking about women, because the ways that they were talking about women were none of the ways that she had been treated as a slave. She said, "I have worked just as long as any."
I don't agree with this. It's not just boring, it's causing brain damage. I mean, I don't agree with this. I'm sorry. We do this because this is about learning what these people believe so that we can effectively combat the cultural revolution that's going on. And the thing of it is, you cannot beat people if you don't understand them. So saying this is causing brain damage, these people are mentally ill, well, these people, I say this all the time. Every time someone poo-poos what these people are doing, they're kicking your ass. You are losing to these people. And part of the reason that you're losing to these people is that no one is inclined to sit their asses down and listen to what they have to say. So I try to make it fun. I try to make it interesting. We can make fun of them. We can mock them. We can drink our drinks. We can knit our shawls. We can do whatever we want to do. But it is important that we sit down and listen to them with the understanding that they are not mentally ill. They know what they're doing. It is a concerted, focused effort. We must know our enemy. And so we have a good time with it, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. And it's fun to mock them. And they say some cringy shit, man. Yeah, sit back, do some crafts. It'll make it easier, I promise. Guys, we do happy hours on Friday at 5 p.m. Please mount that like button if you haven't already.
Man, I have been sent out to the fields to work just as long and hard as any man, and no one's ever called me dainty. No one's ever called me delicate. No one's ever helped me out of a coach, you know? And so she's naming the hypocrisy of a gender system.
Brandon's playing 4-card bingo. That's fancy, Brandon. What a good idea.
Ida B. Wells did a very similar thing in the late 1800s. She is
no, they're not mentally ill.
She is famous,
they're not.
Is because she was able to create a strong coalition against anti.
Every time you guys say that these people are mentally ill when they are not, you are setting them up to become more powerful. They're not mentally ill. They know exactly what they're doing. They are focused on their goals. They have different values than you do. Not everyone who disagrees with you is mentally ill. Every single time that you guys say that these people are mentally ill, you are handing them a victory. You are handing them more power over you. And if they're so mentally ill, then why in the fuck are you losing to them? And what does that say about you?
Against lynching in the South and against sexual violence against Black women. One of the ways that she did that was by naming both. She named sexual violence against Black women as a form of racial terror under Jim Crow. And she also named lynching as a form of sexual violence that maintained the color line in the South during this time. Claudia Jones came to New York from Trinidad in the early 1900s, or early to mid 1900s, and she was a long-standing member of the Communist Party. I love this quotation. She, in an end to the neglect of the problems of Negro women,
long-standing member of the Communist Party. You don't say.
Many progressives seem to know that once Negro women undertake action, the militancy of the whole Negro people and thus of the anti-imperialist coalition is greatly
So you're losing to mentally ill people.
It's also worth noting that one of the political
Congratulations, you're losing to mentally ill
with
people.
Other Black women was called Sojourners for Truth. Then we have Frances Beale, who was the co-founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee generally, one of the organizations that basically desegregated the United States, but specifically the South in the Black Freedom Summer of the 1960s, mid-1960s. She wrote Black Women's Manifesto, or Double Jeopardy, to be Black and Female. That was originally published as a pamphlet in 1969. And then was eventually published as part of in an anthology by Toni Cade Bambara, another famous Black feminist author who we'll be talking about.
One of the things that's very striking to me about these people is that they are living proof that writing a pamphlet can make a difference, and writing a pamphlet can have long-lasting effects. And I just want people to think about that for a second, because I think that, you know, in the age that we live in, and this is something we've actually talked about in my community, in the age that we live in, so much stuff is done digitally that a pamphlet, a paper pamphlet, can actually be one of the most effective tactics to use. And anyone can make a pamphlet. You guys can all make a pamphlet. You can all make a pamphlet about what's going on in your communities, what's going on in your schools, hand them out, deliver them to the neighbors. And like a pamphlet, a simple pamphlet. This guy's talking about a pamphlet that one of these women made decades ago. That can actually have real impact. As long as you just keep handing it out, keep printing out more copies, keep handing it out, printing out more copies, be persistent. It's interesting to play with some of these kind of more what we might consider old-fashioned techniques, because they can work. And these people are living proof that they can work.
Later, in her Black Women anthology, we have the Combahee River Collective in 1979, who were organizing mostly against the disappearance of Black women in the Boston area and Mashpee Wampanoag territory, and the lack of any attention that anyone was paying. Mainstream Black organizations were not paying attention to this. Women's organizations and feminist organizations in the late 1970s were not paying attention. And so they began to organize on behalf of themselves, right? And so they specifically, in their statement of purpose, or in their statement, a now famous Combahee River Collective statement, talked about the need to consider people as not merely raceless or sexless workers, but to always consider that workers have a race, have a sex,
he is obsessed with land blessings.
And then there is Angela Davis in this line as well, who in Women in Capitalism wrote, "The objective oppression of Black women in America has a class and also a national character. Because the structures of female oppression are inextricably tethered to capitalism, female emancipation must be simultaneously and..."
The structures of women's oppression are inextricably tied to capitalism. Everything that these people consider to be oppressive is linked back to capitalism. So whether that be misogyny or trans rights or whiteness or any of these things, we all need to understand that they are always and forever trying to abolish capitalism. All of this is just about capitalism. Everyone has to look at it through this lens, to use their terms.
And explicitly the pursuit of Black liberation and of the freedom of other nationally oppressed peoples, right? And so we are seeing 2 centuries of a really long idea. All of this was written before Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality in a law journal article in 1989. but she also stands in a legacy of Black women who have been organizing for themselves for the past 200 years in order to bring communities together to advocate for true freedom from multiple versions and dimensions of the oppression of Black women. And so the reason that all of this is so relevant, not only because we are indebted to them for the language that they have given us to have these conversations, is also because many of the Black women who were fighting for their freedom faced constant antagonism and faced constant barriers from the gender binary itself. Here's a story actually that I want to tell. It's from 58, right? And so Sojourner Truth is at an anti-slavery meeting in northern Indiana, and a rumor was spread among the pro-slavery people that she was actually a, quote, man disguised in women's clothing. And so when it actually became an uproar and somebody said, how dare you? And she said, how dare you ask me this? What reason do you have to question my gender publicly when I'm just speaking? It's because he said, you are too strongly spoken. You seem too strong to be my idea of a woman, right? And so in that way, fighting for freedom over time has always been thought of as something that makes you subvert or fight against gender norms, especially for women and people who are not men, who are fighting against their subjugation.
People who are not men.
And violence against them by patriarchy. To not identify with the gender that you are assigned in slavery or in an oppressive system is, as a matter of fact, way more common than trans people and gender non-conforming people. Gender norms are not politically or racially neutral. Women like Sojourner
exactly, incognito, exactly.
They were fighting to free Black women from oppression, and they frequently criticized the contradictions and the different hypocrisies that were present in white gender norms and categories. Here are a couple of other examples from very, very recently about the contradictions and the hypocrisies of white gender norms. One is the fact that in France right now, face coverings, if you are a Muslim woman, are banned. Face coverings in order to protect people from COVID-19 are required by law. The contradictions.
Well, we could just get rid of the
another one.
The mask requirements. I think that'd be a great solution.
The International Olympic Committee actually, for the first time, chose to define what a woman was in order to stop Caster Semenya from beating
not
the
everything
white
that
women
capitalism is
around her
responsible for is
exactly
good. We know that, Murphy's Pool.
And so now we're back to Toni K. Bambara, who in the Black Woman Anthology also talks about Black feminism needing to also submerge all breezy definitions of manhood and womanhood until
Black feminism is crazy. We need to do a whole Black feminism day.
Blackhood. What she's saying here in my interpretation is that manhood and womanhood have, as a matter of fact, never served Black people. They have harmed Black people consistently throughout time. That manhood and womanhood are standards.
How fascinating. Manhood and womanhood have never served Black people. It's almost like they were trying to abolish the gender binary back in the day in 1969. Holy shit. Yeah, Black feminism is fucking nuts. Huh, fascinating.
That Black people have been excluded from, and that when we have chosen to fight for our freedom, many times it's been through the ideas of manhood, being a full man, being a full woman, and yet those have not fully served to actually free us in this time, right? We can now admit in this moment, 2020, I guess 60 years beyond the time when the kind of I am a man phrase is being used, right? I am a full man, that actually that was not quite a complete political vision for Black freedom. And that is not to disrespect our ancestors. They, in many ways, and elders, they did the original work to bring us to this point, right? It is to say that they also were thinking about the many contradictions that were caused by their own thinking and their own organizing at that time. And so there are some facts to establish here. One, there are no such things as male genes or female hormones or a male body. Those are...
I was muting because I was eating. I'm sorry, what? There's no such thing as male genes or female hormones or a male body? Are men like people who grow a penis? Oh, I'm sorry, there aren't men anymore because women can have penises too. See, guys, this is why we watch Happy Hour, because we sit through the 29-minute land blessing and we sit through a whole bunch of bullshit, and then we get to, there's no such thing as male genes, female hormones, or a male body. Yes, Kristen, trust the science. Exactly. All right, everyone, let's all take a collective sip. We're going to do our Scott Adams, and we're going to do a simultaneous sip for Happy Hour. Let's hear what this is about.
Are inventions of ableism. Here that word comes back, because the idea is that these genes, hormones, and bodies are supposed to be doing things based on the gender that scientists assume us to have. That when they see people that they think of as men or think should be men, they have said, oh, you have your genes, which are the same genes, overwhelmingly, we're talking overwhelmingly as in 100%, the same genes as women or as people who are not male. And that to say, oh, your genes are entirely created to make you male because male is the sum total of your identity to me right now. They say the same thing about hormones, even though all humans have some balance of hormones like progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. They are consistently referred to commonly as male hormones and female hormones, as if people who identify as men, or as if men don't have testosterone, and women, as if men don't have estrogen and progesterone, and as if women don't have testosterone. Never been true, never will be. Also, there's no such thing as a male body, because in order to do that, you would have to line up every single human in the world, ask them how they identify, and then create some sort of pattern out of that. To my knowledge, no scientist has ever been able to achieve that. Instead, what they have done...
I'm going to make sure my husband knows later that he doesn't really have a male body after all, because there's no such thing. Then I'm going to congratulate him on his non-maleness.
Make assumptions based on their political view of how society should be. Another fact to establish is that intersex people, or people who are born with sex characteristics that we think of as not exclusively male or female, those people are just as common as people with green eyes or red hair. As in many systems of oppression, the reason that folks are treated as rarities or abnormalities is because of power relations. And we can define those as ableism, the idea that that you're supposed to have one sex because that's the best way to do what you're supposed to do as a human, which is reproduce heterosexually. So we can see that the false expectation for how humans always use their bodies is both a symptom of ableism and patriarchy. The other thing to say here is that transgender people are not new. Transgender people have existed throughout time, before the word transgender existed, before the English language existed. Transphobia is also more than a moral failure. It is a structure. We have some
Did you get a blackout
here that show
Phil, you got a blackout
of transgender people getting supposed.
This might be the first ever. Oh, you're going to blackout. Did you get a blackout, or you're just drinking? Oh, you got bingo? Excellent. First ever happy hour blackout bingo. Yay! Well done.
Supposedly more accepted, more common, despite society progressing over the many years, that violence against trans people and the social exclusions that cause poverty, unemployment, and other kinds of oppression, right? That those continue to this day. That as a matter of fact, if we look across gender categories, that patriarchy continues to have structural and systemic impacts that impoverish people who are not men within the capitalist economy, right? And so to break that down, that simply means that trans people are being discriminated against because the structures of society operate naturally and systematically without any intent from people, even though there's a lot of transphobic intent and intent to harm trans people in our world. Ending transphobia means that we don't need to just be nice to each other or accept people for who they are. It also means that we need to fight the systems that have actually created transphobia and maintain it in our world. And so now we're going to talk about what some of those systems are. So before we do that, we have to, again, define imperialism. My apologies, everyone. My doorbell is ringing. So I'm going to continue speaking. Hopefully it won't interrupt too much. So there are some, this is a map of the countries in the world that have been under European control. As we can see, almost every single nation, or almost all of the land on Earth, has been either under European control or considered part of Europe. It's kind of wild how Europe goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean when white people draw the maps. We also can see that the United States inherited that legacy of going to other places and not minding one's business. This is a map of every, and the red is every single country that the United States has ever been at war with or invaded. So we are talking about a global system that has impacted everyone in the world, regardless of where we sit and regardless of whether race as a construct
you can leave
in our nation, right?
You don't have to stay here.
So I want us to do a little poll here to talk about what is imperialism.
Oh my God.
The poll is going to be, where is our clothing made? So what I want you to do is to look inside of your clothing and to look at a tag inside of your clothing.
China.
Many of us have tags, unless our
Who has China?
And that tag, on that tag will say made in, I have a top that is made in Turkey, right? And so I'm going to release a poll here that should be coming up on your screen. And what I would like for you to do is to vote in the poll the world, region, or continent, or the countries in where your top, your pants, your dress, your skirt, etc. was made, right? And we're going to see, I'm going to keep this open for like 30, 40 seconds here.
What is the point that he's trying to make with this? I'm sure we'll find out.
It takes way more than 40 seconds to look at a tag in your clothing sometimes, so I'm going to keep it open for longer than 40 seconds.
Oh God,
so
we're just going to sit here in silence? What the fuck? I'm going to keep it open
for another 40 seconds from now, probably. So we'll keep it open for
He did just assume our garments, Benjamin. How rude.
I hope nobody was rushing.
Yeah, so where's your yarn made? Iceland? Iceland makes good yarn. In Iceland, you can buy yarn in the supermarket. I want to go to Iceland so bad.
I'm seeing here, if you don't, some of them are not named countries, right? And so
how are they not named
if your country's not named, go ahead and just put it in the world, put it in one of the world regions that are close to it. For example, I'm seeing Honduras was named, so I would personally put that in the Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central America portion.
You could just guess where your clothes are made.
I'm going to end the polling in another 10 seconds here.
Is he going to call everyone imperialists for having clothes that are not made in the United States?
Excellent. So.
Oh, you grow your own hemp fiber. That's industrious, Trendelin.
Here are the results of a group of about 300 totally random people. The vast majority of our clothing is made in South Asia and Southeast Asia, a full 41%. And I know that might actually not be a surprise to people, but that is not a natural economy in the world.
Right, because it's where you can get clothes made cheap. And you guys are socialists, so you don't have money.
The world produces
so you buy cheap throwaway clothes.
Majority and holds such a high majority of the low wage factories and the low wage jobs. And that is
Kino's wearing my shawl, made in America.
It concentrates
with yarn
power
from Ireland,
in the hands of very few Europeans who basically shaped the entire world such that the factories that produce the goods that they want would not impact them negatively by being close to them. And one of the ways that they did that was by taking over other countries and by shaping their politics and their economies such that they would produce cheap goods for people who exist in the countries of Europe, the United States, and other global north countries, as we call them, right? Another word for global north is imperialist countries. We simply don't name that because we don't always want to call people thieves to their faces. And so when
but if people were wearing clothes that were made in America, he'd shit on that. It's never going to be good enough. Miss Problematic on one of my cards, so 3 down for bingo. Brandon's having a good day. I think it's a great idea to play with more than one bingo card. I never thought of that before, Brandon.
Thinking of the definition of imperialism, it is oftentimes referred to as the policy and practice of forming and maintaining an empire in seeking to control raw materials and world markets by the conquest of other countries, the establishment of colonies, etc. And so what does this have to do with gender?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
I want to tell a story here. I was one of my favorite authors and academics is this Yoruba Nigerian woman, Oyeronke Oyewumi. And so I got the opportunity to hear her speak. It's funny. I was talking to the interpreters before this started, and I was like, I'm not going to give any book recommendations that aren't already in the presentation. That was a lie. I apologize. So she wrote a brilliant book. She's written many books. One of them is called The Invention of Women, about how Western gender categories arrived among the Yoruba of Nigeria, the Yoruba people of Nigeria and Cameroon. And so she told this story about how men, Yoruba men specifically, would be telling her that it's traditional that men wear the pants in the Yoruba family. Her response to that is, and when did you start wearing pants? Pants are a European Western invention. So what kind of phrasing were people using?
Where were leggings invented? Oh, God.
Power that men should have over everyone else before pants were brought
time for the 12%
or even invented.
Where were leggings invented? I want to know what country I'm culturally appropriating.
Was originally, or in the 1920s at least, was actually thought of as a masculine color, and blue was thought of as a feminine color. There's another picture here. This is from the 80s in Iran. It's a piece of propaganda, or a pamphlet actually, about women in Iran from the early Islamic Republic in the 1980s. And so the thing that the Farsi down here at the bottom is saying is that they're highlighting, based on how people dress in those nations, what that society prizes.
It just occurred to me, isn't this like a QAnon thing? It's not, okay, it's not quite a triangle, but it's really close. Is this a QAnon beer? Holy shit. I don't know if I want to drink this now. For those who just joined, this is a 12% beer that the chat is cajoling me to drink, and it is a double almond, double chocolate, double coffee, imperial stout with lactose, sugar, chocolate, coffee, and almonds added. 12%. And apparently, it's QAnon. You guys didn't know that QAnon made beer, did you? These are the fun facts that you discover on Happy Hour. All right. We've still got 50 minutes to go in this presentation. If I fall over onto the floor, it's all your faults, all right? Brian says it's the all-seeing eye Illuminati. Well, I know the all-seeing eye. I'm just talking about the triangle. That's like a QAnon thing. Oh my God, it's so dark. Oh, it's so dark. Oh God, I'm gonna die drinking this beer. It's probably better to do it now instead of Socialism Saturday. Oh God, this is so alcoholic. Oh my God. Cheers, everyone. Oh, God. I don't know if I can do this. Red Sings the Blues, new donator to your channel. Like the discussions. I would love to have you on my podcast. How can I contact you? You can reach out to me. Thank you, Red Sings the Blues. I appreciate it. Reach out to me at activelyunwoke@gmail.com. I will answer you tomorrow when I'm not drunk off this crazy 12% beer. I appreciate it. Oh, God. Oh. The triangle is? Okay, I'm going to take a drink. Hang on. This is thick. This is like syrup. I'm not mad at it. This is a sipping beer. This is a sipping beer that you do with your pinky out like this. I should really go get one of those like little tiny little wine glasses. You know what I'm saying? Like with like you have it out like this and it's like a little bit of mead or something. Oh God. All right. Let's keep going.
Is about those women. And so they're trying to make the point that because women in the United States are never covered, that their bodies are what are prized. That because their arms are not covered in the Soviet Union, that their labor or their work is the only thing that's prized for women. And then they're making the point that in the Islamic Republic, women are asked to cover up in order that the society prioritize
does look like oil,
what is
Kara.
in their brains and in their hearts. A possibly feminist message, depending on how it's used and who is using it. So, of course, race and empire would be involved in the gender norms and expectations changing across time. Now I'm going to go into a quick non-binary people are not new. This is the extended remix edition. So this is going to go a little bit quickly.
I like how he's just removed all the vowels. There are no vowels in non-binary, guys.
Feel free to just grab
except for the O and the I,
a
but
little
the
tidbit
MEA,
and do
kind of
more
technically the Y if we're being,
research.
you know.
So I want to start off here with creator deities. So on 3 different continents that I can identify, at least, creator deities are either bigender, androgynous, or have multiple genders. At the top, we have Mawulisa, who is the creator deity.
Okay, what's about to happen is he is about to completely and totally pervert what is actually happening. With a lot of these ancient civilizations, you'll have symbols like this and you'll have gods like this and deities. And what they're saying is, and this is true in general, every single person is an equal balance of masculine and feminine energies. In way, like I have more masculine energy as a woman, and there are some ways in which you guys don't see on the internet that I'm much more feminine. Okay, because I'm a perfect balance of masculine and feminine energies. That has nothing to do with what's between your legs. It's like in some situations, like when I'm on the internet, I'm gonna have much more masculine, kind of assertive, power, like all like traditional energy. But there are other times in my life where I'm much more feminine and softer and receiving and all of that stuff. Okay, masculine energy, feminine energy. You're seeing this in like the Da Vinci Code. Masculine energy is the triangle because it's a phallus, masculine energy. And then you have feminine energy, which is the receiver of the phallus. Okay, you guys can see where this is going. This symbology exists throughout history. Anyone who has ever read the Da Vinci Code understands this. And he's about to pervert it to say all of these people were non-binary. They didn't have a gender. No, they did have a gender. They did. There's just also an acknowledgement that everyone is a perfect balance of masculine and feminine. The V, yes, exactly. The V stands for what the V stands for. Nick Incognito says, you fall over, I laugh at you, LOL. I appreciate that, Nick. Thank you for the support. Yes, it is a P, a phallus, and a V. The other thing.
Of the phone people, who are also famous for inventing Vodun. So they are in Benin. Mawulisa is a bi-gender deity, has masculine energies and feminine energies, masculine aspects and feminine aspects.
Oh God, the spirit is so
also,
strong.
Also, in South Asia,
he just said what I did,
there is Adha Nareshwara, and so that is a composite deity of the feminine aspect of power, Shakti, and the masculine aspect of power, Purusha, represented by the gods Shiva and Parvati, who are also consorts for one another, but at times they also are represented as one person with two sexes or genders. And then on the bottom left, on the bottom right here, we have a drawing from the Aztec Florentine Codex of Ometeotl, who is the Nahuatl god of duality of creation, and is also thought to have a masculine and feminine aspect. So now we can get to real people, right? So let's acknowledge the fact that these societies all think, when they think about fertility and creation, that they think of bigender, androgynous, and intersex people. We should just name that, right? The Cheyenne and the Arapaho also have bigender or intersex deities that are creators for them. So we're talking 3 different continents. This is a quotation from Juan de la Bandera's notes during Juan Pardo's expedition to Cherokee and Catawba territories during the 1500s. And so what's notable here is not only that they, in the 1500s, saw people who might refer to themselves as two-spirit now, or people who are not binary, were not identified as men or women in the way, as cis men or cis women in the way that we do today, but also that the cacique, or the chief, as the Spanish referred to him,
thank you, Red Sings the Blues.
The Indian was his brother. Now, I don't know whether that means biological according to our patrilineal or our kinship structures, whether that means that they were directly came from the same parents. What it means is that the chief said, "This is my people." They said, "What's that person over there doing?" And the cacique said, "This is my people," you know, and then explained to them why that was happening in 1567. This is a drawing of a person who was called Kimbanda in Central Africa, or Jinbanda. It was painted by an Italian monk. So a Catholic went to the courts of Angola in Central Africa
silly Catholics
in the 1600s, and even he could not avoid drawing non-binary people. It's also worth noting that he was in the royal court of Queen Njinga, who might better be referred to actually as a king. She herself did not dress or present herself in the ways that we think of as cis womanhood. She had an entire harem of people who she dressed, all of them, regardless of their shape and gender, as women, because they were her wives. And then during the time of photography, actually, the British were then, when they were photographing in colonial South Asia or in colonial India, they photographed Hijra, which is a gender group in South Asia. They were forced onto a registry and then legally outlawed by the British Criminal Tribes Act in 1871. And so it's also true that in the main epic of, or one of the main epics of the Hindu religion, the Mahabharata, that Arjun, one of the warriors of the main families in that epic, was also cursed by a goddess, I believe, or by a deity to be a eunuch for a few years or a portion of his lifetime. And so Hijra and eunuchs as well in South Asia have a 1,000-year history that stretches back long before colonialism and long before transgender is a word. Colonizers violently suppressed any ways of being that they didn't like. Often the first people to be affected by this kind of violence were people who didn't match European understandings of men and women. So when they would arrive in places, they would say, "You are not doing what we think that you should be doing. And so we are going to end your life for it." And so that is why one of the main ways that transphobia was created by colonization is through warfare, the actual warfare through which conquest happened. And so the first instance that I have been able to come across of colonial violence that is also an instance of transphobic violence, interestingly enough. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa was traveling through what's now the Isthmus of Panama, looking for what people were calling the South Sea. Or he eventually, quote unquote, discovered the Pacific Ocean. And so people build lots of monuments and parks and name cities after him. But what is also true is that he was a violent mass murderer. In 1513, he was traveling through the Isthmus of Panama when he discovered the village of Quarequa. He actually had already murdered the leader of that village before he entered the village. But when he entered the village, what he found was a society in which people were not held to the same gender expectations as the conquistadores were used to in Spain. And so he identified that as sinful, as demonic, etc. And then in one of the most famous instances of violence in the Americas, threw 40 unarmed indigenous people to be torn to pieces by dogs. And one of the more famous paintings of the conquest of the conquistadores, related by Peter Martyr in Decades of the New World, is a depiction.
This guy wants to be a history professor is what's going on. He wants to be a history professor, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he needs to go and be a history professor.
What is also true is that gender expression was legislated, stratified, and segregated racially in colonial societies for everyone. An example that I have for that is the Tignon laws in colonial New Orleans. And so colonial New Orleans in the late 1700s, like the 1790s, was Spanish, and then for a bit was French mostly, and then for a bit Spanish, and then the French got it back and sold it to the United States. That's kind of the history. One of the things that the Spanish governor did while for the short time that he was there, was create a law that said that Black women cannot wear their hair openly in public. They have to wrap it up under a scarf or a tignon in French. And so the Tignon laws were laws that required Black women to wrap their hair in public. Why? Because Black women were so fly, basically, that they were getting so much attention, positive and negative in public, that the Spanish governor was asked by Spanish women to actually stop Black women from adorning themselves freely in public. And these were free Black women who were also subject to these laws. All Black women were subject to these laws. And so, right, too fly for the colonizers, because what Black women then chose to do was decorate their scarves. And so some of the most amazing headscarf and elaborate headscarf wrapping came from the Caribbean from this era. And New Orleans was definitely part of the Caribbean and is part of the Caribbean because of the Tignon laws. And so Black women were resisting the many ways that they were told, you can't be women like these other women, because either for reasons of competition, for reasons of making sure that people understand themselves as less than. To situate people as less than requires legislating that they not be able to be like you, even in public, even when they are free, even when they are legally supposed to be considered just like you.
Do any of those policies still exist today? No. The answer is no, they don't.
What is also true is that myths about the inferiority of colonized people were oftentimes attributed to their inability to do gender like white people in Europe. And so the lack of proper manhood
gender
and
like white people, what the fuck does that mean?
Savagery, of backwardness, of the devil, and evidence of the lack of humanity. And so these are some photos that were used as before and after photos for the Carlisle Indian Residence School, and is an Indian residential school. And so the Indian residential schools were created out of the idea that one needs to turn indigenous people into proper men and women. Unfortunately, many indigenous societies, besides the fact that they didn't want this, also were not binary societies. And so many people who were not
Janet, apparently they did know what a woman was.
Were forced to become men or women through the residential schools. And the residential schools themselves trained everyone to be men and women through extraordinarily violent, harmful, genocidal means to be proper men and women. So while some were excluded from society in this way, from being able to be men and women like others, others were forcefully assimilated as part of state tactics. And then the binary is also enshrined in laws that were used to prosecute people. folks were demonized, ridiculed, and excluded from society and ultimately erased. I want to tell the story of Victoria Antonio here. Victoria was a person who was kidnapped and sold in one of the slave ports of Benin in 1556 and came to Portugal during that time. And so what I want for everyone to think about is the fact that there were so many transgender and gender nonconforming people who were being kidnapped and sold by communities that thought it would be more convenient for them, and that then those people were then formally not allowed to be who they were in wherever they went, right? That as a matter of fact, slavery involved a whole bunch of gender coercion that was not just along men and women lines.
I mean, were other people
Victoria arrived in
sold as
Lisbon in 1556, and she promptly refused to wear any of the clothing that the guy who owned her, his name was Paulo Manriquez, he refused to wear any of the clothing.
We got a super chat from Savritz. Thank you. They're cheating the androgynous human. When man knew no woman and woman knew no man is an organism, everybody will be one thing. I don't want that. I don't want that either. I agree with you. They're creating androgynous. I mean, this is what I say when they they want to eliminate the gender binary, right? They want to eliminate men and women to create a world full of theys. And I don't have any problem with androgyny, but like, come on. They are men and women at the end of the day. Yeah, it's like with this story, thank you for the super chat, Savritz. With this story, it's like they glossed right in there. They're like, this person was kidnapped in the 1500s in Portugal. It's like, okay, how many other people were kidnapped in the 1500s in Portugal? Like, I'm not questioning the story. I'm questioning that they were kidnapped because they were non-binary. I want evidence. I want receipts. It is, they're ruining androgyny is what they're doing, Savritz. And I appreciate David Bowie. I appreciate Brian Malco. Like, I appreciate these like androgynous fucking icons. And now they're ruining everything.
Clothing that he gave her to wear because it was the clothing for a male slave, right? And so she dressed herself. She dressed in a waistcoat and a white turban and a jacket and maybe even like a little corset thing, and set out to create a business for herself in Lisbon. And that business was sex work. And so she actually was so popular that men could be seen lining up around the block outside of her home. And she was international as well, because she operated that business not only in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, but also in the Azores, which are.
So I have an article that I'm working on for my Substack right now that, check this shit out. This is some of the most dystopian nonsense you're going to hear all week. There was a medical journal article that came out last week or this past week that said they're trying to get women to donate their bodies after death to gestate a baby in a corpse of a woman. I swear to God, this is a real thing. This is a journal article. You guys know how we've been talking about how like how surrogacy is one of their initiatives because they want to eliminate the biological family. They literally want to gestate children in donated remains. I'm going to have an article coming up on my Substack, hopefully tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be tonight with this beer, I'm telling you that. But hopefully tomorrow before Socialism Saturday. But yeah, that's creepy. And it's on my Twitter. If you guys want to go see the article, I tweeted it last night. I'm going to write up a whole thing about it. But God.
Islands off the coast of Africa. And so she was a jet-setting entrepreneur in the 1500s. So the Portuguese Inquisition got wind of what she was doing, as well as the fact that she was then guilty of sodomy or homosexuality, according to them. And so they captured her again, and they forced her to undress so that they could see basically how her body was shaped. And they determined that her body was that of a man, and then she was sentenced to live the rest of her life in a cage. The interesting thing to name about Victoria, though, is that when she is giving testimony about herself, she said that there are many people like her where she comes from in Benin. And she also said that she had an understanding of her body as her own, right? That she had a special orifice that she used to please men called the buraco, right? And that many people where she was from had this very special
orifice that they use to please men, like the ass. I'm pretty sure everyone has that particular special orifice. It's not... Okay, let's just listen.
Orifice, right? And so she's naming that there's a group of people who have a very specific way of understanding their bodies that was not, that Europeans simply didn't care about, or that Europeans thought that they needed to eradicate.
You think that Europeans don't care about anal sex? Steve, you picked a hell of a time to join the stream. Welcome. Europeans don't care about it. I just don't, I have no words. Okay, let's just keep going. Oh, James Lindsay called it the universal vagina.
And so we see that these Western standards have been imposed for what gender norms look like. That those are usually
Grace
based
Jones.
on the binary practices of the European middle class.
They would have transitioned
right?
Grace Jones.
In the context of the United States, those people have all been settlers. And then everyone who doesn't
Marquis
fit
de
into
Sade
that
had
has
many
been
special
criminalized,
orifices.
has been demonized, has been thought of as ridiculous for the ways that we move our bodies, for the ways that we use our bodies or don't use them, for the ways that we adorn our bodies.
Yep, I'm drinking it right now,
and
George.
this has legacies
Cheers.
all the way down to today. And so Maria Lugones is a brilliant scholar who has called this system the coloniality of gender. For those of us who don't love the weightiness of that phrase, we could also call it the colonial gender binary, right?
What a time to be alive.
Definitely want to shout out Maria Lugones here. And so that is, in many ways, the system that we are now fighting against. When we name transphobia, the reason that this system continues to impact Black and Indigenous people so deeply, continues to have the highest murder rates in places that are in countries that are close to what we call the capitalist core, right? Countries like Mexico and Colombia and Turkey and Brazil, is because of this colonial gender binary. It's because the gender binary is not only meant to keep all people down who are not men, but it is also meant to maintain the colonial racial hierarchy. So now a little bit.
I have so many questions about this slide. I have so many fucking questions.
For questions.
What the hell?
I'd love for us to take 10 minutes for questions. And so again,
oh sure, you
can
be king of the chat. Congratulations.
Function.
See, asking you so
and that
shall
is
receive,
be
guys.
The way that we are going to do this.
Malcolm,
I'm actually gonna, yeah.
Emmy has typed in one of the questions in the chat.
Awesome.
For you to answer.
Great. I see the first one from Emmy. Can you talk about how non-binary Black and Indigenous people of color risk appropriating Indigenous gender identities? I think I would probably need to hear a little bit more. Okay. Oh, I actually am. Great. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
So,
the gender binary is a European construct
of appropriating Indigenous gender identities. I think as a Black...
Hang on, we got a super chat from Savrits. Thank you, Savrits. Imagine this process of nations will bring peace, nobody else to discriminate against. Everyone will look the same. No white girl hair to pull out. That is the goal, is to make every single person the same. To all have us think the same thing and present the same way and wear the same clothes and eat the same food. It is a world full of fucking conformity.
person in the African diaspora, it is difficult and almost impossible to appropriate that which belongs to the African diaspora. And African people, as I have named, are also indigenous. And so should really be clear that indigeneity is an international frame. So if we're talking about North America, though, like indigenous people in North America, the Pacific Islands, like the Western Hemisphere, for example, people who experienced European colonialism from 1492 onwards and were racialized as indigenous, I would say that in the legacy has been fought such that Two-Spirit people have survived so long over this time and have sustained themselves and then reawakened their movement in a gathering in 1992 when the term Two-Spirit was invented between indigenous activists from the United States and Canada, and I believe other places in the Western Hemisphere as well. And so that is my understanding of the history of the term Two-Spirit. And so if other people who are not from those groups, who are not members of nations, who are not self-identified as indigenous from the Americas, or even from North America or Turtle Island, choose to use that word, that is a conversation I would say for people to consider amongst themselves. But I would say that appropriating anybody's terminology from outside of their experience is always going to be a recipe for disaster. I see another question that says, as non-binary people in diaspora, how can we hold ourselves and others accountable as we seek connections to gender identities that colonialism has erased from our personal lives, but were and or remain recognized groups in the lands we know we are genealogically tied to? This is an extension of the earlier question. Thank you. And so in that context, I would say as a non-Indigenous person, as a person who doesn't identify as part of an Indigenous community, this is very difficult for me to like answer. And so I really want to stay in my lane here, to be honest. The best way that I can think about it is to quote some folks who are like Adrian Keene, for example, people who are part of Indigenous nations in North America. And the one thing they say is that if you want to be a part of a community, that you have to go and be a part of that community. You have to contribute. Harlan Pruden says that Two-Spirit is not just a gender identity. Two-Spirit is a role and a commitment to one's community. It's a role and a commitment to your nation. It's a role and a commitment to your people. And so one cannot simply say one is a thing or say one is Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit is just as much a practice and an action and an organizing tradition as it is an identity. Let me continue. All right, here's another. If gender is a social construct, what does it mean when we say masculine and feminine energies and aspects?
Ooh, a disruptor.
To describe people and ideas across time and space. Gender is a social construct. Masculine and feminine are social constructs. These are simply words that I'm using that are easy, I think, in my.
How are they social constructs when the deities that you referenced like half an hour ago in this presentation will flat out tell you that they are a perfect balance of masculine and feminine energy? Like, how are they a social fucking construct?
Mind, and that have been used to describe different people through time. I do believe there is a such thing as non-binary masculine energy and non-binary feminine energy, but it sounds like maybe that was in the context of talking
they're
about
all non-binary. Got it.
Bigender deities who represent masculine and feminine aspects of the universe. That's simply how those indigenous groups talk about them. And so I'm sure if we were to, we could find many different ways in English when they're explaining things to people who are not part of those groups. That's what I should say. And so I'm sure if we were able to speak with them in their languages right now, or if I were able to speak their languages to you right now, we might hear a bit more nuance than masculine and feminine energy. For a deeper exploration of that, I would encourage people to check out the work of a healer from West Africa, from Burkina Faso. I will type his name and stuff.
I have worked with many indigenous healers, and they all acknowledge that masculine and feminine energy are a thing. Savrit says the level of cognitive dissonance in these people, well, it's not even cognitive dissonance, Savrits, because they are fully capable of holding two completely conflicting ideas in their heads at exactly the same time, and they see no problem with it. It's actually like, I mean, it actually is quite impressive. It's like, you know, I don't co-sign calling these people mentally ill because I don't believe they are mentally ill. I believe they have goals. I believe that they know what they're doing. I believe they're very, very strategic. But there is something to be said for the fact that they can very literally hold two completely conflicting ideas in their head at exactly the same time, and there is no cognitive dissonance that I can detect. It's almost like psychopathy. And again, I'm not calling them mentally ill. I'm not saying they're psychopaths, but I feel like that's something that psychopaths can do. It's like they just have no connection to the fact that there's two conflicting ideas in their head. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
In some resources that I sent out to you all, but I
It'd be interesting
he wrote
that,
a book called A Ritual of Water. And so he writes a lot about how masculine and feminine aspects are not necessary for how we talk about gender and embodiment, but are simply metaphors, just like anything else that we don't have to hold people to. I hope that's someone asked, can you speak to the notion that two-spirit is not a monolithic experience or term? So this is, again, y'all pulling me way outside my lane here. So I gave my understanding of the history that I've been able to learn about the term two-spirit as an umbrella term by indigenous activists of Turtle Island. There's a lot. Two-spirit, however, is a translation from one indigenous language of North America, and there are thousands of them. And so that means that there are thousands of nations that had to then retranslate two-spirit back into their own languages, even though if there were people who were not identified as men or women in their societies, that they would not have necessarily been thought of as having two spirits. Because again, that would be to say that there are two spiritual genders when we know that there are more than that, right? And so I don't think that two-spirit people are limiting themselves in any way. I don't want to say that ever. But what I do know is that there's a lot of disagreement among indigenous people who are LGBTQ or who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, et cetera, and queer about whether two-spirit is a traditional term, whether it should be used, and in what context. I'm seeing one more here. Can you talk a bit more about internalized transphobia?
Oh God!
In BIPOC communities as a result of colonization and what healing could look like moving
forward? My God! That was the most buzzworthy question I've ever heard in my life. Can you talk about internalized transphobia in BIPOC communities as a result of colonialization? We're going to watch more videos from this organization. I have a feeling.
I think I may save that. I may save that because I want to, there's a section that actually addresses that here.
They've got
what I will
Kendi.
say in terms of addressing internalized transphobia, what healing could look like moving forward, that part we can get to late. That part I have a little bit planned for, but internalized transphobia, I have so many theories about why violence against transgender people is so rampant in Black and Indigenous communities of color and communities of color. I think many trans and gender.
I really want to go to their conference. I want to go to like all these woke conferences. I feel like it would be so fun. If I did crowdfunding campaigns to go and attend these woke conferences, would you guys support me? Because like, I feel like that would just be a really great use of resources to send me to these conferences just to like hang out and we can get, I know Kino can help me out with like a spy cam or something. I need like a pin cam to be able to like see, or like Google glasses or whatever, to be able to like secretly record everything. And I'll go and sit through all the sessions. And I'll like live stream that shit like covertly. Yes, Trendlin, you can come too. Everyone can come. Yeah, Kino's coming too. Excellent. We're gonna be like a fucking posse, but we gotta be guys, we gotta be cool, okay? We gotta be incognito. We can't give ourselves away. We can work on disguises. Yes, Bot, you can come too. I can just wear hats. I can wear hats and sunglasses. Everyone can come. Kino, shout out to the head juggalette who's doing chicken hunting. Who's going chicken hunting? We's going chicken hunting. Got a motherfucking chicken now, right? Boom. All right, no more singing. That's it. That's all you get.
Non-conforming.
We've got half an hour left. God damn this 12% beer.
Queer people all around the world are trying to all the time think about how we could be rejected by the people who raised us and how we could be rejected by the communities that are so under assault.
You are cool, Barb.
And that
we love you.
Need us, right? And so
yes, you can.
One of the theories that I have is that this legacy of violence, of extraordinary gender violence, of children being snatched away from their parents, of people making
shout out to the senior festival fajita who crumbs. I have no idea what that means working away, but thank you.
In certain cases, in order to make money or to survive.
Yes, Lady Hawk, exactly.
People choosing to limit who they are and their own gender expression to participate in a society that would have killed them otherwise. I think that there are really deep scars that have been covered over and papered up by our communities, and I'll speak to Black communities specifically in the United States. I think there are many ways in which Black people
when's that socialism
see gender
conference
nonconformity
happening?
Or see non-binary and trans people and see a freedom that they fear. And I think that fear is psychological, but I also think it has to do with the fact that there are power interests in Black communities that also want to maintain patriarchal gender norms because they think that that is what civilization looks like for us in the long term. They think that Black people are still not civilized. And for us to become civilized, we need to tame our sexuality and our gender. And that one of the ways that we do that is by erasing trans and gender nonconforming people by making sure that we don't exist. And so I think that's
it's just a benefit for watching my channel, Alexis.
Reasons, right? One psychological that has to do with intergenerational trauma, and one that has to do with material and political interests. So thank you, everybody. I'm gonna move forward a little bit. I'm gonna reshare my screen again.
They had like a question break.
And we're going to continue.
What is this image?
So in spite of this, right, now we get to the fun part, or more fun.
Oh no, we're getting more history.
There are people who refuse to be confined by this binary. As a matter of fact, all we've been hearing is stories of people who refuse to be confined by this binary, whether it's Sojourner Truth or Angela Davis or Frances Beale or Claudia Jones or Ida B. Wells.
We have half an hour.
Victoria,
we have 30 minutes left.
Two-Spirit activists, right? And so I want to tell a few stories. All of these are from the African diaspora as well, from some of these different times. The first person is Eleanor Céspedes. Eleanor Céspedes was a person who was a barber, a surgeon, operated as a nurse in Spain in the 1500s. And so the thing about Eleanor is that they actually changed genders multiple times throughout their life. And actually, I think
I'm not doing clown makeup for PorcFest. I don't want to wear that on my face all day. But they do have face painting at PorcFest, and so you could probably get your face painted. Guys, everyone should plan to come to PorcFest. That's pork, P-O-R-C, as in porcupine, not pork as in bacon. PorcFest, P-O-R-C. Okay, PorcFest break. Porcfest.com. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Everyone, if you're going to come, you got to make your reservations because the lodging is going to sell out. It is a week-long libertarian festival in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire. It is a pop-up anarchist village. There are no police. There are no rules except for don't hurt anyone and don't take people's stuff. Other than that, no rules. There's all sorts of stuff going on. There's a naked section. There's naked Olympics. I swear to God. You can bring kids. I know that doesn't sound like it goes with naked Olympics, but like there are lots of kids that come. They have kids activities. There are libertarian speakers. It's amazing. Make sure you make your reservations, your hotel reservations, because things do sell out very, very, very quickly, and they're going to start selling out probably this month. You can do there's Airbnbs, there's swanky hotels. A lot of people are coming. Yes, there will be a pig roast. They don't kill the pig at PorkFest, but there is a pig roast. It'll be amazing. Come to PorkFest.
Transgenders. And so when they came to the attention of Spanish authorities, they revealed that they were intersex, and that's one of the reasons that they were able to mold themselves so freely.
Look at that outfit.
According to them, right? And so they were
that outfit is not butch. I'm sorry, that is not a butch outfit.
Spanish medical texts throughout the 15 to 17 and 1800s about intersex people. Eleno de Céspedes became famous, actually, for doing what they wanted, and also for finding ways to make a life where before they might have been simply reduced to being an unhappy woman.
I dare you to wear that outfit at PorkFest.
Mary Jones was another entrepreneur, just like Eleno and just like Victoria, in New York in the early 1800s. I think the really interesting thing here is that just like Victoria, Mary Jones also talked about the acceptance that she has from her community in Louisiana and in New Orleans and in New York. She came to the attention of the authorities because
you don't have to go to the nudist area. You can stay out if you want to. It's big enough where you don't have to go anywhere near it.
She would take their wallets and would replace them.
In fact, the nudist people are not, they have to wear clothes when they leave the nudist area. There was an incident this past year where the head nudist that was organizing all the stuff in the naked area, he left the naked area wearing nothing but a very, 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 very tiny Hawaiian lei. And it didn't cover anything. There was leaves, but the leaves were like this big. It was basically he was wearing a grass belt. And so he got in trouble for that, and there were rules put in place that they can't leave the fucking nudist area without actually covering up, and you don't have to go to the nudist area if you don't want to.
The wallet of a client that she had beforehand. She was a sex worker as well. But she did other things. She also worked as a tailor. She also worked as a waiter as well. And so this is one of the few images of Mary Jones that we had prior to very recently, but because of the work of brilliant Black trans women, we're able to have more images that we can have for our memory, right? So this is a still of
you think this was from the 1800s?
Who's playing Mary Jones.
Oh, it's a movie.
Tourmaline's recent film, Salacia, which came out last year and is a short film about a day in the life of Mary Jones, who lived in a free Black community of New York in the early 1800s.
You can do that, Lady Hawk. You can.
Frances Thompson was also another famous free Black trans woman. And so she was born a slave in the South, but was freed during emancipation and settled in Memphis. And so was a victim of sexual violence and rape in the race riots. Race riots really is a pogrom. What in fact happened is that with the help of the police, white people in Memphis in 1866 set fire to many of the Black people's homes in Memphis and ran them out of town at gunpoint. And then as some people were running out of their homes, would shoot them. And so this was not quite a race riot. What it was a massacre. It was a racist massacre. And so Frances Thompson became the first Black woman to testify before Congress in 1866 because she organized Black women to go to Congress in order to testify and let them know what happened. And she was the inspiration for Congress passing many of the laws to protect Black people, the few laws to protect Black people that they did during Reconstruction.
It's true. The struggle is real. We're going to get through it, though. We're going to do this together.
To deceive society because she was a trans woman, and therefore that she was also making up the many stories, and that all Black women had been making up the stories of sexual violence that they experienced during the massacres and the many pogroms of Reconstruction. And there is a quotation from Sultana Isham as well. William Dorothy Swan was known as the Queen in Washington, D.C., my hometown, in the immediate time after World War II. I'm sorry, after the Civil War, not World War II. And so I put some of these quotations here because honestly, I think they're goals a little bit. So they were famous throughout the medical establishment. So they were accused of keeping an organization of colored erotopaths by Dr. Charles Hamilton Hughes in the 1880s.
Really?
Dr. Irving Ross described Swan's group as a band of Negro men with androgynous characteristics, which is also goals. And then finally, the U.S. Attorney General singled out William Dorothy Swan, saying his evil example in the community must have been most corrupting. And so this is a person with not only a high profile, but some excellent organizing skills. And those organizing skills were consistently shown, especially when they were incarcerated for the second time in 1896 for having a drag ball at their home in DC. And their friends with William chose to petition the President of the United States. So we are seeing in 1896, 30 people going on record that they care about the livelihood and the well-being of a gender non-conforming person in the 1890s, right? And so this is when people say that we weren't around, that our community has never cared for us, or that we're new, or that this is all a lie. It is a function of power. It's a function of power. All of
power is all they care about.
By communities who
that's why they focus on power.
Miss them when they were gone. Bonus. So there was in 1971 or 72, Huey P. Newton released.
I have to say, I do actually appreciate the historical nature of this presentation because it is demonstrating that these people have been enacting this bullshit for much, 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 much longer than I think any of us originally thought. So this progressive bullshit has been around for like a really long effing time. And it's actually giving me a little bit of hope that, you know, they've been trying to do this stuff for a while now and it hasn't really worked out for them so far, but they're kind of winning right now in the US, but it's been like a slow march. What I mean by that is, and it might not be coming out coherently, is they're probably not going to win in our lifetime. They're going to win eventually. They are. Because they're way too far ahead and people aren't fighting back in the way that is necessary in order to beat this cultural revolution back. But we'll probably all be dead by that time. You know, you got to take comfort where you can.
Letter to the Black Panther Party about the gay and lesbian rights movements or gay and lesbian power movements, where he talked about the fact that it's no longer he is growing and the fact that he is creating a strong coalition with the people who were part of the Stonewall riots, and who came out of that. But what is less well talked about is the fact that he actually met Sylvia Rivera in person at the Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention of 1970. Sylvia Rivera had taken some money from the organization that she had just founded.
This is basically like a Socialism Saturday.
Revolutionary, and had gone to DC because she said, if all the gay rights people are going to be there, then STAR, which is the name of the organization that she founded, needs to be there too. So Huey P. Newton apparently referred to her as the Queen from New York, talked about how the Black Panther Party was fully in support of the work that she did, and they had a full 5-minute conversation. People a lot of times credit the white gay movement with the change in Huey P. Newton.
And they changed the world.
About homophobia and transphobia in the Black Panther Party, but I actually personally believe that it was the organizing that he recognized and could really give credence to the street kids and of the drag queens, etc.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge what Jacqueline is saying. They got into our education system, and that's when it really started to ramp up. They got into the educational system a while ago, but everything that I'm seeing on the school websites that I've been researching to create the Schools Exposed program is that they really started cementing in policy around 2010. So the cementing of woke bullshit into policy in most school districts, at least as best I can tell right now, is a relatively recent thing that has happened in the last 15 years or so. But that's important because they made a lot of progress in those years. That's the fucking linchpin, man, is the public schools. Everything is going to hinge on what's going on in the schools, and can we beat back the Cultural Revolution before they fully indoctrinate the current generation in public schools? Because if they get the current generation, we are so fucked. It is going to be so difficult.
Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. called themselves, who were doing that work to bring a large coalition together to fundamentally change how power operated in the United States. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition then, but we also have a lot of time since then, right? So now what I would like for us to do is to spend 5 minutes just doing a brief reflection for ourselves, thinking about our future, right? And these are questions that I would like for us to respond to. We've been looking at a world system that has been created by very few people with
I'm talking about K through 12 schools, warfare, Alexa. So I no doubt it was, but I'm talking about K through 12.
Through patriarchy and through ableism and many other systems of oppression, right? That basically excludes people based on how their bodies are shaped, what they choose to do with those bodies, and that the reason that they gave for that in many cases was gender. That system continues to impact everyone, but has also resulted in a culture of total impunity for the violence that happens against trans and gender nonconforming people of color, and especially against Black and Indigenous people. And so that is one of the reasons why we see the murder rates and the rates of death among trans and gender nonconforming Black and Indigenous
it's been in president colleges so much longer.
In places that are experiencing or have experienced colonialism or are included in a colonial world system. And so I want us to think about how we get out of that, how we move together when we're not that, but also about the legacy that we have of people already choosing to opt out of that, no matter the consequences. And so I want us to build a vision for ourselves here. What would your body look like and be like without oppression and exploitation? How would you be shaped? How would you move? What things would be a part of you? What would be like your cyborg parts, if we're using a different word? And then finally, how would your community treat this body, and how would your body make community? Let's take 5 minutes. So from now until
they're doing a breakout exercise
to just do some thinking about that and to do some reflecting. Nico, could you give us some music for that?
Oh God, hang on. No, we get to fast forward. Excellent. He's just staring at the screen. He's literally just staring. Holy shit. I don't want to get a copyright strike or nothing. Okay.
Come back and go to our final Q&A section of the day here.
What an appropriate slide.
I'm going to put my screen here so you all can see my face. I love seeing everybody's face. So our first question is, are there ways that people from Caribbean islands or West Indian background can reckon with the very problematic mindset that the colonial gender binary has wrought in their music and culture and families? without totally giving up said music and culture and families. Whew, absolutely. I myself am a person of Caribbean descent. My father is Jamaican from Montego Bay. And so I would definitely say
I want to go to Jamaica.
For us to reckon with the mindset, right? Does it mean that we can immediately
I love Jamaica.
change our families and our society?
I rode horses on the beach in Jamaica.
No.
They went into the ocean and everything.
Could automatically
it was great.
Change society. But there is a major legacy as well of people who have already been doing this work to look at. I would say that an anthology that has been really beautiful for me is Thomas Glave's Our Caribbean, which is an anthology of writing by gay, lesbian, I think only at this point, gay and lesbian people from the Caribbean.
Can you identify as gay and lesbian and from the Caribbean and still be included?
Gender nonconformity and trans identity in it, and how it impacts the experience of people who have been colonized. I would also say that having a conversation with our families about the way that the gender binary harms everyone because of racism and white supremacy is really something that I would just recommend more and more people doing as much as possible. I think it's one way to make this really understandable and deeply concrete for people, is to understand that there's that we're all part of the coalition that's being forced out of power because of how we don't measure up. Are there any other questions? Is the way we understand and use the term gender and Western/colonial, should we deconstruct the category altogether to understand the ways gender is expressed and understood across culture? Gender, the second time, is in quotation marks. Yes, is the answer to that. Maria Lugones' work, actually, I referenced her earlier, talking about the coloniality of gender. Her point, one that she makes actually in that paper, is that it's not only that gender oppression is introduced against people who are not men and women like in Europe, but that also the idea of gender itself, the idea that you have a body, and that body, the way that it's shaped, determines your social role for your entire life with no exceptions, is a very Western idea, as a matter of fact. And so, and that your identity is what can be physically perceived about you, right, is also a very Western idea. And so we could, in fact, deconstruct that category and the relationship between those all together, but I haven't yet found an amazing exact way to do so in English, you know. I have another
lots
question.
Of word salad. I thought it was just the beer, but no, apparently it's lots of word salad.
Asking me to talk about some of the ways that gender is normalized through surgeries performed on children. And so there, the work of Sean Saifa Wall actually is an activist who I would recommend everyone check out on this. I will type that name into the chat here. And,
they don't think surgery should be performed?
They're an intersex activist based, I believe, out of the Midwest.
Do these people not believe that gender-affirming surgery should be performed because it reinforces the gender binary? Holy shit. I really hope that's what's going on.
Who's been doing a lot of work to connect how violence against intersex people in Atlanta. I'm getting a correction here. He's in Atlanta. Thank you. So Saifa is based out of Atlanta, and Pigeon, got it. Their main co-organizer oftentimes is based out of Chicago. Thank you for that correction. And so the two of them are oftentimes doing work to illuminate the connections between violence against intersex people and white supremacy. What is true is that the same doctors who invented the idea of binary sex by looking at a lot of children and a lot of did so by examining a bunch of different people, many of whom were intersex. And so they came up with theories about intersex people and how they were abnormal, even though, as we said earlier, power is the only thing that determined them as such. Intersex people are extraordinarily common. And so they created this theory that an intersex nature is primitive and therefore has more expression amongst primitive people.
Of course they want people to be non-binary. They want people to be intersex. They don't want to fix that shit.
Like The Evolution of Sexes, for example, by Geddes Thompson, or who else am I thinking of? The work of Francis Galton, for example. Francis Galton, a famous eugenicist and actually the coiner of the term eugenics, was deeply involved in the creation of the idea of what makes men men and what makes women women physically. And so many of the people who were creating the ideas that we now have debunked thoroughly about the scientific and biological divisions between the races were the same people creating the ideas about the scientific and biological distinctions between the sexes. And so what is true is that starting in the 1940s and 50s, I believe, they decided to start operating on infants, on newborns, without their parents, with their parents' consent, but always without those children's consent, to normalize the appearance of their bodies, oftentimes their genitalia, such that they looked and functioned like binary sex genitalia should. And of course, there were very patriarchal norms and sexist norms for what genitalia were supposed to be shaped like. One example is that oftentimes if people were thought to be, that we decide that the scientists or surgeons would decide, hey, we want this person to live their life as a girl or woman. And so that means that they need a functioning vagina in their vulva. And what that means is that instead of, for example, allowing that person's body to do what it would normally do and to grow like it normally would, they created a false orifice inside of that body, because the definition of vagina means that it needs to be wide enough, Freudian slip there, wide enough to fit the average male penis, according to science, right? And so the idea is that women are...
Hang on. I'm sorry. I know this isn't the end, but we need to rewind this. This is fucking crazy. Hang on. I want to relive some of this. A vagina needs to be white enough? Holy shit. This is why you stay till the end at happy hour. Every fucking week, the craziest shit. Without fail, the craziest shit always comes in the Q&A. Never, ever, 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 ever skip the Q&A, folks.
Consent, but always without those children's consent, to normalize the appearance of their bodies, oftentimes their genitalia, such that they looked and functioned like binary sex genitalia should. And of course, there were very patriarchal norms and sexist norms for what genitalia were supposed to be shaped like. One example is that oftentimes if people were thought to be, that we decide that the scientists or surgeons would decide, hey, we want this person to live their life as a girl or woman. And so that means that they need a functioning vagina in their vulva. And what that means is that instead of, for example, allowing that person's body to do what it would normally do and to grow like it normally would, they created a false orifice inside of that body, because the definition of vagina means that it needs to be wide enough, Freudian slip there, wide enough to fit the average male penis, according to science, right? And so the idea is that women are shaped to be receptors for male genitalia, or for genitalia that is considered male in Western society, right? And so that is, in a way, the way that violence against intersex people through surgeries has also normalized violence against women generally.
What? Oh my God.
I have one question here. What are your thoughts of using the incredible biodiversity we find in nature as one starting place for debunking the binary? I love that idea and would love more and more people to do it all the time. So yet another person who is just brilliant is Jess Chen, who wrote an entire open letter, I believe, that was a poem to the Pope a few years ago that talked all about how nature is just so queer. And so one of the things examples that they gave in the poem were bees, and the fact that bees don't have
they are transing the cows
in the way that we do.
Transplants. Everything is queer. Everything is non-binary.
So many examples from nature about how, because non-human animals are definitely not sitting around here wondering if they're being manly or masculine enough. That's just not the reality.
My dog absolutely wonders if he's being masculine enough. My dog has been afraid of something for the last 2 days.
Encourage everybody to check out their work, as well as if you're in a more academic mood, checking out Greta Gard.
My dogs got in a fight the other night, and apparently there was food thrown about. It was a war over a bone. One dog stole the other dog's bone, and then the other dog went full fucking nuclear on the first dog that stole the bone. And now the first dog that stole the bone, I swear there's a point to this, is like cowering in the corner all the time, shaking anytime the second dog comes close to it. And the second dog's being perfectly fine now because now the bone has been eaten and it doesn't exist anymore. But like my dog 3 fucking days later is absolutely questioning his masculinity because he's cowering in the corner because he was traumatized by a fight over a bone. I'm just saying.
Toward a queer ecofeminism. And I'm also typing that here. Toward a queer ecofeminism. So with that said, there are like 1,000 more questions that we could answer, but we're also at time here. And so I want to just wrap up by saying thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for giving your time to this. I really appreciate the time and the thought that you all have put into this. I guess I should share my screen one more time because I have a slide that says thank you. Yeah, thank you is really what I have to say here. Thank you so much. Would really encourage you to consistently check out the work of Black trans women who are around you and doing brilliant work all the time. As we can see, we exist in their legacy, and so would not have been able to do any of this without them, as well as the people who have organized to keep them and our community alive. So
oh God, help us, Barb. I could probably find that. Maybe we'll do Black feminism next week.
After this, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Well, what a whirlwind that was. That got really good right at the end, didn't it? Maybe it's the beer. I don't know. I haven't had a lot of this beer, but it's hit me pretty hard. Well, guys, that's happy hour. You now know the lesson that you always stay until the end for happy hour. But I just want to remind everyone that we are doing Socialism Saturday tomorrow night on my channel. And you can tune in at 6 p.m. We get started a little bit later on Saturdays because it's my weekend too, all right? And we're going to be watching Whiteness and Capitalism tomorrow, a tiny little socialism podcast that I just found. And, we're going to give them more views on the internet than they've gotten so far on their 3 episodes. We're going to do that at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And as a reminder, please make sure you're subscribed to my Substack, Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. I have a piece coming out hopefully tomorrow about surrogacy and dead bodies. Fun times. All right, guys, please mount the like button on the way out the door. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We do happy hour every Friday at 5 p.m. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow for social.